Hi, everybody. It's Susan here. I just wanted to drop in and talk about this week and the next week to come, where we're going to have a full moon in Libra. And we're actually at the quarter moon today as I record this. We're recording on the 26th of March here, and the moon itself is about to conjoin Jupiter, which it rules. So the moon is in its own sign and now with Jupiter. And we've just had a trine from Mars back to Jupiter. So this has been a really good week for strategizing or planning something with a sense of purpose and higher meaning. And although there's also been a bit of pressure around that, there's this kind of serious aspect here with Saturn conjoining the Sun. The Sun was exactly conjoining Saturn on the 25th of March, so that's yesterday. And both of them are still very strongly in a sextile to Pluto. Pardon me. So this, that's from chocolate, by the way. I just have to admit it. I have this weakness for chocolate, especially because I'm in Belgium. Again, I'm back in Brussels for the week and I just can't resist. So when I'm back in Spain, then I don't fill up on chocolate as much. But anyway, here we are. So we've got this extraordinary configuration now of a lot of intensity around doing things that we need to do, things that become very necessary that we need to take responsibility around. It's quite a serious aspect in terms of the Saturn with the Sun. Of course, it's an annual thing. It's not like it's not happening regularly, but it's different now because the Sun is in its exaltation in Aries, and Saturn is absolutely not. So Saturn is considered to be in fall in Aries because it's in exaltation in the opposite sign of Libra, which is where we're having this full moon coming up on the second of April, Universal Time. So this is the first opening quarter of the Pisces new moon that we had last week on the 20th. And so it's telling us something in so many different ways about how we need to move forward. So we've got an inkling now of what needs to change or what we need to take action on based on that Pisces new moon. And you can see what I said about that in the video from last week. But it's quite uplifting. It's something that gives us a lot of potential and hope, having just had that trine from Mars to Jupiter. And soon, as we go forward into the week ahead, we're going to have Mercury trining Jupiter at the full moon. So there's a lot that you can look forward to. Mercury is moving away from the North Node. So often this is a signature of now having received new inspiration and new ideas, or at the very least, a new realization around what needs to be done, because Jupiter is direct since the 11th of March. And that's helping as it's ruling Mars, Mercury, and the North Node in Pisces. So it's been a rough ride for the last month or so. As you notice that this whole story of the war against Iran and the whole dynamic that has expanded into has been with Mercury retrograde. And now as Mercury is going direct, the chaos that the last 3 weeks have brought most people and are trying to grapple with what's actually going on is going to start to clarify. For many people, it's already clear, but I think for many more people, it's going to be much more clear as they start to wake up to the reality of what's actually happening around them. Perhaps also, again, in the individual circumstances, certainly a lot of people I've been talking to are finding that this is now a moment where the rubber hits the road. We're clear now. And this is really helpful, having the Sun exalted with Saturn. It's understanding what is my role, what is my duty, where do I need to step up? And with the sextile to Pluto, it's really about major change. How do I fit into this social disruption? How do I fit into this change? How do I fit into my vision for life and my future? Because Aquarius is all of that. And Pluto, of course, is in Aquarius until 2044. So this is the story of the bigger picture for all of us. And then, of course, individually, we'll see it where it is sign by sign as I go through that. At the same time, I put in some of the minor planets where we have Ceres in a very strong a very strong square rather, from Taurus back to Pluto. And this carries a similar kind of message of needing to find security or finding that there's some insecurity in the overall picture right now. So this would be the opportunity to really dig down and say, what do I need to take action on? How do I need to do something about what makes me secure? And what I need either, materially or financially or even emotionally to feel more secure. And that square, although it brings about immediate tension, it's a need for adjustment. It's just showing you where you've become uncomfortable, and it promotes action, let's say, where the trines tend to make things smooth. You can ignore them. You can say everything's going to be fine. It's all good. Where the square says, no, this is really uncomfortable. We need to do something about that. And then the sextile that comes from, so the squares are of the nature of Mars, where we need to take action on it. And the sextile that's here with the Sun and Saturn back to Pluto is of the nature of Venus. And so that means it's a striving for something that is more harmonious, that's bringing the potentials of Venus and the Venusian sort of harmony and cooperation. And the trine, which we saw already here, is of the nature of Jupiter. And that's why trines with Jupiter are extremely full in potential. They're very rich in potential, all the more so because Jupiter is here with the moon in its own sign. Now, the one major caution of this moment is that we can become extremely emotional, and then equally with the symbolism of Cancer, not just emotional, but hyperprotective. And that can be with the combination of all of this Aries energy here. There can be not only a hyperprotectivity or defensiveness even around oneself, but also one's family. And even when we think about a nation, the home or the homeland, that's also Cancer. And so in a global situation, this can also expand this emotionally driven reactivity or emotionally driven need to defend and protect that is not always coming from what is rational. And here again, we have Mercury, although it's moving forward now, it's actually, of course, in its fall and in detriment in Pisces. And when it's close to the North Node, as I've mentioned in previous videos, it can cloud our judgment. It can make things unclear. So although there's a potential, if we're really consciously trying to find clarity, there's a potential for the last 3 weeks to start making sense now in a way that we can grapple with. There's equally a potential for things still not to be making sense or not finding clarity. And this is, again, part of the extension of the world that we live in. So individually, we have to really sit back and reflect. Mercury in a water sign is very much in an emotional reflection, as water signs, whether it be the moon or Mercury, always respond with emotionality. Same, of course, with all of the relational planets like Venus and Mars too. So it's something to reflect on. Am I sentimental and am I emotional? Am I acting from fear? Am I acting from a place of logic and reason? And which of that palette is serving me best? So the other aspect that's really strong here is an ongoing trine from Juno. I spoke about this last time, which is at the end of Capricorn now, and actually in a waning trine now to Uranus. And that will be the last time that we have a trine between these two, because Uranus will be another 81 years or so before it actually goes back around to the end of Taurus here, or longer, I guess. And so here we have another story of security. And with Juno, it's got the same kind of dynamic here around taking care of one's relationships with integrity, acting from a place of integrity within relationships. And we have to think about that in the broadest sense, not just our own individual relationships, but our relationship to society, to the world, to our partnerships of all kinds, to our people, to our children, our families, of course, all those symbolisms that come through the Capricorn dynamic, all the more strong because of the moon and Jupiter here. And so that's another symbol that just keeps repeating in this season. It's really about trying to understand where we need to take responsibility for things in the way that we can, because there's a lot that's happening in the world that we simply can't grapple with. We just can't do anything about it, basically. So as we go forward into the next week, we've got Juno approaching Pluto, and we'll see that at the full moon chart. And then that creates a sextile to Neptune. So again, there can be something that feels either aspirational or inspirational, but also there's that ever-present tendency or potential for this Neptune to feel self-defeating. It can feel like a lot. And this is also the Pluto that's being sextile by Saturn Sun, where Saturn can dim the sun, even though the sun is exalted here. They're still not friendly. Saturn and the sun don't get along. The sun is about pure potentiality, and Saturn is about endings and the heaviness, the three-dimensional necessities of life. So it can make us extremely serious and committed. And that in this moment is also the best way to use this kind of energy. But equally, there can be an element of depression and a feeling of letting go. And again, I would caution that this is definitely not something to let yourself sink into. We have to find that reservoir that's deep inside of us. I'll talk about that more when we come to the moon. Venus is with Eris and Chiron, so she's just a day away from her conjunction with Eris and Chiron, which are still conjoined. It was perfected on the 19th of March. It's still a conjunction that lasts for another week or so, really, really tight, but really another month or so as Chiron takes its time to exit Aries, which it will do in June. So this is still a theme. We're still working on that theme, although the energy is dispersing now. And that theme is really about recognizing how we are acting from a place of insecurity or even self-sabotage. And I think we can see that globally really strongly. And then where we find also this relationship to hypocrisy, where we find this feeling of, not recognizing the integrity or the authenticity of people or governments or rulers all around us. Of course, Aries rules all of that, and so does the sun. Along with Leo. Leo is the king, and Aries is what you could describe generally as a leader. And so we're really in that energy of the sun in the space of leadership here, but it's dimmed by Saturn and under a lot of pressure. And certainly we have to take that on the most personal level possible because I mean, let's face it, the leaders that we have, supposed leaders around us, are pretty dire. So we want to really keep going inwards, and that's where the Jupiter moon is really helpful right now. So Venus herself is not very comfortable in Aries. She's ruled by Mars here. And because of that Mars rulership, she can be very individualistic and impatient and less thinking about the other. And there can be an element of selfishness there. And that can be another part of this Chiron Eris conjunction with Venus, where that triple conjunction can show us where we may have been actually acting from a place of selfishness as opposed to enlightened self-interest. And we'll talk more about that when I talk about this full moon in Libra. So there's a lot here that is about our personal mastery. We've looked at that notion of self-mastery since last year when Saturn first moved into Aries. And by the way, if you have Saturn in Aries natally, use that code self-mastery in one word, all in caps, to get a 10% discount off a reading with me if you are born with Saturn in Aries. Because this is your moment to jump into that and to really look at all those ways that you can navigate this moment in time. So one last thing about this particular moment is that Mars is in the 12th house from Aries that it rules. Now, this can be problematic in the sense that Mars can be doing things that are not entirely clear. It's a Jupiter-ruled Mars. Now, the good fortune here is that we've just had a trine from Mars to Jupiter, and it's still active. It's still considered to be an orb, although it's a separating trine. But the fact that Jupiter is exalted, it's still at the degree of its exaltation. It's still connected to Ceres, where the moon is today, and that's also a higher vision, a higher vision for what we're here for. But remember that Ceres, it represents finding that vision, finding that spiritual mission through difficulty, through struggle. And this is my moon placement, which is where I'm intimately familiar with that energy of Ceres, where there's a need to go through something difficult to get to the other side where the wisdom is. And in the Indian astrology, this is Ardra Nakshatra, and that's ruled by Rahu, actually. So here we come and find that the North Node is there in this space of trying to find this wisdom, which has been the story of the Mercury retrograde since the 26th of February. So it's a big ask. It's a big ask for many of us, but the most important thing is to really find that inner motivation that comes from a higher place to overcome any feeling of weakness or any feeling of, poor old me, and which is part of where that Neptune and Aries can bring us down. But we want to keep that sense of what is possible, the image of what is possible. Because although Mars is in Pisces 12 houses away from the sign that it rules, and sometimes, jumping in, sometimes trying to avoid, which is also the energy of Pisces. It's especially Mars there doesn't really know, it can't be consistent, let's say, because it's all about this kind of the watery idea that, things will just, it'll be fine, it'll all wash out, it'll all be fine at the end of the day. Um, what's the expression? It all comes out in the wash, something like that. And so there you have this opportunity to recognize, okay, there's something waxing and waning in me, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't take action. There's always capacity to take action, but rather than always thinking in terms of what to reach out in, maybe the action is about the internal understanding of action. Like, how do I act to find a better place for myself in my own experience of this world, or my relationship to what I'm here for, or my relationship to spirit, because that's all of the above. It's very much about a Mars in Pisces story. So there we are. So before I shift over to the new moon in Libra, I just wanted to say hello to the new subscribers that are here. There's some few dozens of you that joined in the recent days, and I'm really grateful that you're here. And I come in semi-regularly, but I don't monetize my channel, so I don't feel any great pressure to keep pumping out content. So you won't find me necessarily frequently uploading, but I try to do something at least every week. And if there's something very interesting going on, if I have the time, I'll do more than that. But do please subscribe, and I appreciate your likes and your comments always, because it helps me to stay relevant, because otherwise I just seem to be drifting into this dark hole of the algorithms, where particularly I'm finding a lot of AI or sort of rapidly generated content it's just overwhelming uploaders and real human beings trying to upload content. So do please, if you can, subscribe and like the video if you do like it, and or place a comment below. And I'm very happy to get to know you here. And I also do, of course, consultations, as I mentioned, around the Saturn and Aries. You can use that code self-mastery in all caps to have readings with me if you have that natally. I do have a lot of things going on at the moment. I'm teaching at the moment, so it's going to be a bit of a wait for a reading, but if you book now, you'll get one, certainly, I think, by May. So let's have a look now at this Libra full moon. The Libra full moon is playing on what we're looking at here. As I mentioned, now we've got the shift of Juno moving in and becoming closer to Pluto as we're shifting gears here in all different ways here. It is at this full moon, different realizations, a different energy, because now Venus, instead of being with Chiron and Eris, where it's pretty crunchy, and also in the sign of considered her fall, she's now at home. And she's at home with Eris, which means that there's this huge potential as they're rather squaring back to Juno and to Pluto, to find the courage and the determination to realize what needs to be changed. But Venus is actually finding this energy, of course, much more easy to deal with. I think we might find a lot of resolution to some of the things that are going on in the world, because we're starting to find this space where Venus is about recognizing what we value, what is of value, how we deal with our valuables. And this is also what Ceres is looking at as she's about to be conjoined by Venus in Taurus. And then equally, we look at what is sustaining us, that sense of what sustains us. Well, our relationships, that there's nothing more we can say about that. And so here we have a Venus at home in her domicile, ruling now this moon, which has gone from that first quarter phase from Jupiter now into the full moon phase in Libra. And it's very interesting to have Jupiter squaring this. The moon is approaching the square. It'll perfect the square just hours after this full moon, which is in universal time, 2nd of April, 2026 at 3:11, almost 3:12 a.m. So that's more or less corresponding to London time. And this is for North and South America going to be on the 1st of April. For the rest of the world, it's the 2nd of April. So what we're finding here is an answer to the eclipse that we had in 2024. So these are what are called the lunar families or the lunar gestation families. And this cycle is very interesting to follow because of that eclipse of the 2nd of October 2024, which you might remember was linked to the attack of Hamas on Israel, which has started now 2.5 year process of ethnic cleansing and genocide in Gaza, and which is a part of the story, a major part of the story that we're seeing play out exactly right now in West Asia, or what we call the Middle East from the European perspective. And so what we're looking at here from the 2nd of October 2024 at 10 degrees and 3 arc minutes of Libra, where that was a new moon phase, we're coming to the full moon phase of that. But before we do that, just as we saw from last week, the moon moves into a quarter moon phase, and then the full moon phase, and then the final quarter, the last quarter or third quarter phase, before it actually completes the cycle into another new moon phase. And so the opening quarter of that eclipse cycle was the 2nd of July, 2025. And you'll notice again that that was a very heated summer, quite a lot going on there. I'm sorry, I just realized I pulled the 2024 date erroneously. It's actually it was 2023, wasn't it? My God, can you imagine now? We're going just a ridiculous, it's such a long time that this has been going on. So it was actually the 7th of October, 2023. So forgive me, that wasn't correct. That wasn't when it began. So that was something that we see as the anniversary, the first year anniversary of that event in Israel, and we're now seeing the consequences that grow from that place. So forgive me, it's not from the 2020, it's not the 2023 eclipse. That was the one that was on the 14th of October, 2023, where that happened at 21 degrees 7 minutes, which happened to be also on Israel's ascendant as a nation. So this is at 10 degrees 3 arc minutes of Libra, the 2nd of October 2024. And I'll put these dates below this video. Do note, well, these dates, if you track things in your own life, especially if you journal, go back over different dates and see how things are finalizing themselves at this point in your life. So again, then the opening quarter phase of that was the 2nd of July, 2025. And still there, we can say that that was a very heated time because that was part of the buildup to the initial attack on Iran. And of course, that's what we're in the middle of quite right now. So it was last year, July, where there was this 12-day war that was the initial attack on Iran, which apparently it obliterated all of the supposed nuclear weapons, which didn't exist, but were obliterated, but which now are being obliterated again. So just notice how these things tie into the themes of this lunation cycle, especially in your own life. So that was happening at 11 degrees and 9 arc minutes of Libra. And then we got to the full moon phase, with this full moon phase, which is now the 2nd of April, 2026. And that is at 12 degrees of Libra, 21 arc minutes. That's what we're experiencing now as we look at the chart in front. And then this cycle will close out as it's closing down in the third quarter square on the 30th of December this year, 2026, at 9 degrees of Libra and 5 arc minutes. But at the final conclusion of this cycle, which is simultaneously the beginning of the next one, is the subsequent Libra New Moon, which happens on the 30th of September, 2027. And that's at 6 degrees and 43 minutes. So you'll notice that these lunations go backwards because they're moving through the precessions of the signs as we go through the lunation cycles. This we call primary motion, and this is something that will take again this bigger cycle of 3 years, starting from the point of the 2nd of October 2024. So it closes out 30th of September 2027, and that's an interesting lunation in and of itself because that will be conjoining Venus on the lunation. So remember, Venus was in her sign now. Is at this moment she's in her sign in Taurus at this lunation, but by the time we close out this cycle, she's going to be in her sign of Libra. So that's an interesting dynamic. But at the same time, where Venus was last week, which was with Chiron and Aries, Saturn will be, and it will be both a retrograde Saturn and a retrograde Aries that is that's positioning itself at that particular new moon in Libra. In keeping in mind that's 18 months hence. So take a look at that if you're an astrologer. It's a very interesting dynamic in relationship to this cycle. So right, here we are now, again, at the Libra full moon. We have this 12 degrees, 21 minute Libra moon. And we have at the opposite side, the sun still in exaltation, but is moving away now from Saturn. So things become clearer in the sense of individuation or self-awareness. And this is where we can start to develop this feeling of enlightened self-interest from the place of responsibility that we saw in the week before, in that quarter moon phase. The sun is going to be moving into this Aries and Chiron conjunction, and that will be by the time of the Aries new moon, which I'll do a separate video about, and that's the middle of April. So once we get to that point about the 17th of April, then there's going to be this questioning again around this bigger question of where am I, how am I up to this? This would be a question to really dig deep on, because that feeling of am I up to this can have us again back in that notion of nihilism or feelings of being disappointed in what one thinks about your role in life or the potentials in life, what is available to us. And we need to keep that, we need to step back and question that assumption, always questioning from a place of recognizing this deeper spiritual awareness of what we are and who we are. So the Libra moon itself is a reflection always, especially at this time, but it's always a reflection of how we identify ourselves and the way that impacts our relationships. So our relationship to ourselves is the foundation of all relationships, always, because that is the essential meaning of Libra, which is finding harmony between the self and other. But if there's no awareness of self, which is the shadow of Libra, projecting outwards, projecting power, or projecting decision making, or projecting anger out onto another, then we're not really aware of ourself. And that's when the Libra dynamic, that shadow element of Libra, is where we kind of lose control. And we feel ourselves being over accommodating, perhaps in relationships, or not being able to find our place in relationships. So the other gets much more of us than we receive in return. And that's just the dynamic of the archetype of Libra in opposition to Aries, which is much more about the action-oriented self, highly self-aware. And the shadow of that, of course, is selfishness or self-centered behavior. So this is something always to pay attention to. And then that extends into our relationship, not in the dyad necessarily only with the other, but also our relationship to the larger whole, and including that dynamic around, the perpetrator and the enabler, for example, the one who allows, and the kind of codependent tendency. It's a very interesting dynamic in these signs. The cardinal signs all carry a strong signature of this kind of, in fact, every sign does actually carry this signature, as we look at in the introductory course in astrology. Every sign has this, but it's more evident perhaps in these cardinal signs where it really is about who takes action, who does what, and how is that action taken. And so we have the Cancer and the Libra aspect, which is much more receptive, even passive, or even avoidant. And the Saturn ruled Capricorn and the Mars ruled Aries, which are much more about assertion and taking responsibility. And that's why they balance each other out. So this is part of what we can look at this time, and collectively as well as individually, especially individually in our own lives, what we need to take care of. So Libra is really as I mentioned, this tendency to kind of look to others to find balance, or to feel that things are happening, for decisiveness and giving up decision making is that aspect of Libra, which is debilitating. It's creating this feeling of being not participating even in one's own life, actually, sort of not taking charge of one's own life. And this is something to notice at this time. So, the problem with the Libra energy in terms of where that is not serving us, let's say, in a general sense, but most especially if you have these signatures in your chart, especially because Venus is always seeking that harmony. We can actually repress the Mars energy. We can repress that urge and the drive and the confidence, and the assertion that Mars does so well, because that is all Mars qualities. It's like slicing through things, being decisive, taking action. And Libra is always thinking, well, what about the other one? How will they be affected, or will they like that, or will they worry that I'm trying to be dominating? And what that does is it represses that creative desire, or that natural creative flow that we all have. And both the drive and the action, whether it's sexual drive or just a drive to get stuff done, that outward manifestation of the Mars energy and the energy for creativity and the creative expression, they're both blocked. They come from the same place. They come from the second chakra area, that energy of Swadhisthana, my own abode, my own sweet home, my own comfort zone, let's say, my own point of creation, that second chakra energy, which is where we need things to flow. When people have hip issues, for example, that's very related to that dynamic. Things have stopped flowing, you're stagnant, there's things that are not moving, or low back issues, for example. And that is something that you can compare to this dynamic of Libra and Aries. Where's this balance off? Where am I not creating? Where am I repressing? And that repression will be something in the order of either avoiding, anger, or pretending I'm never angry. I don't carry anger, projecting anger onto others, or repressing it and then finding that anger comes out because inevitably it has to, and that it'll come out in passive aggressive ways. And so this is where we have this link in terms of that Mars energy in Pisces, which is that Mars that is in water and not always acting with clarity, or not always from a place of repression, but a place of kind of saying it'll all be fine, and so that amounts to almost the same thing, where it's kind of like letting things happen, letting things take their course. And this is the risk of the trine that we had, that energy of trine between Jupiter ruling all of that Pisces energy, and then coming back to the trine from Mars last week, and then the trine from Mercury now. So this energy is something, it can be super visionary and harmonious, but it can also be where there's something that we're letting happen to us, and that's not what we're looking for here. And that can cause a feeling of powerlessness, which is again coming back to that Neptune quality, but it's not going to make us feel secure, which is why we initially think we're doing it, is to avoid difficulty, avoid challenges, to make us feel more secure. But it has the opposite impact because we're not in the driver's seat. So if we develop that Aries energy, which is that enlightened self-interest in its highest quality, that we may have already recognized with the Saturn Sun conjunction and back to the sextile with Pluto, with the visionary Mars and taking it up a notch and seeing, okay, I've got lessons that I've got to learn, or things that I need to work on and fight for that are based on a higher vision of life, then we can really support that enlightened self-interest and not make it a domination over. So blocking any expression of anger, which is legitimate, is repression, and it's going to eventually block us. It's going to eventually create stagnation, and that is untenable in the long run. It might feel safe in the beginning, it's not tenable in the long run. And again, you can apply that to a particular relational dynamic or the overall quality of relationships that you might be experiencing nowadays. So this also with that dynamic between Venus and Mars, which is Venus ruling Libra, Mars, of course, ruling Aries, that Libra and the Aries Libra axis is always about the male-female balance. And we're all made up of masculine and feminine energy. It's not about how we present ourselves openly, outwardly. It's about where we're already integrating masculine and feminine energies. And that also has to be something that keeps its own inherent balance. Whoever we are, it'll be unique to us. And that in its own balance within us, the masculine and the feminine, meaning not always being, outwardly driven or defensive or in that sense of constant achievement, but also considered, contemplating inward reflection, receptivity, harmony, trying to strive for something that allows for accommodation without, ceding territory, as it were, without giving up territory. This is something where we really start to be able to be better in balance in relationships because we're already internally in balance with that masculine and feminine energy in us. So avoiding that stagnancy that can come from not taking action, not taking a decision, not seeing where you have the capacity, which is that energy of the Aries sort of self-drive, and not realizing that that's also available to you. And if it's perhaps the opposite, because sometimes people engage very strongly in the opposite energy, which is certainly a risk right now with all that Aries energy, then we can, although there might be, let's say, planets in Libra and a strong Libran wish or desire, there's a lot of efforting, there's a lot of outward drive, there's a lot of the masculine that comes through. And people are often surprised to learn that Libra itself is a masculine sign. Cancer, Capricorn, the other cardinal signs, they're feminine signs. This is the masculine dyad, but it's where Venus is ruling, and it's about taking action to find harmony. It's taking action to engage with others, to connect with others. So it's not the same as the martial action. And so because we've got so much of this action of engagement, this moon is doing double duty right now. The moon representing the mind and the mind-body complex and our awareness of memories and our connection to instinctive dynamics in our own life. So it's all really coming in the same symbolism, and you can see it happening internally as your sort of internal cosmos is all grappling with this, and then externally, or so-called externally, as you're grappling with the relationships and the world outside. So that function or dysfunction or this balance or imbalance that's there, it starts and ends with what's going on inside, right? So this is a very important thing in this Kali Yuga time, this sort of the dark ages that we're in. Whether or not they're ending or we're still grappling with that is almost moot, because we can see outwardly that it's at the very least at its peak at this point. So the symbolism of Kali Yuga is that the external world and the sort of so-called material world of things and power and subjugation, it becomes more important than spirit, more important than our direct connection to life, or to the internal sensing of life. And, our highest human potential gets distorted with this. And it has been, as we can see, for centuries, getting increasingly distorted as we come to this peak moment of change and shifting energies as in the Kali Yuga. And one of the symbolisms of that, what I was showing earlier about the Ceres in Taurus and squaring the Pluto back in Aquarius, is a kind of a microcosm of this Kali Yuga energy, where it's this fear and lacking and insecurity in the material realm that might really challenge us at this time, because the outer world is so hard to grapple with and so hard to predict and so volatile. And so we want to dig deep into that sense of security from a place of internal grounding. So it's not like piling up your gold, or storing food, which of course on a practical level can be helpful, but it's really fundamentally more than that. So when you are, preparing for your last breath, have you got what it takes to be in a place of harmony and ease? And this is a part of the Pisces message of endings. So again, we have this Mars ruling Aries at this time, which is all about beginnings, but Mars is in the place of endings. It's 12 houses away, wrapping things up in a way to allow us to move into this next thing. But if we don't really, with that, Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, if we don't really dig in and say, what is the ground I stand on, then we might always have that feeling of vulnerability, because the appearance of things outside us and in the material world is changing and confronting. And it's very important to have that inner core and that connection with the cosmos from the inside out, remembering that you're a part of the cosmos, that there's nothing outside of you, actually. If we think about the why astrology might work, I still don't know, but one of my presumptions is that we are a part of the cosmos, and it's all happening through us and in us and around us, but it's all really one and the same thing, all happening in consciousness. And so this is a big time. It's a time to sort of put our big boy pants on in the Aries way and say, we can do this, we got this. And the reason that we struggle in life itself, or what appears to be outer life, is because we're not at ease with ourselves. And this is the essence of that dynamic between Aries and Libra. We feel that we're struggling with somebody else. We feel that we're struggling with life, or with, I don't know, a boss or a spouse or government or whatever. We think that that's the struggle, but the struggle is always within ourselves. And when we come back to that place of solid understanding of who we are in the context of this bigger dynamic, there's less struggle and there's more clarity. So it requires us kind of stepping back and taking a breath, and not always engaging outwards, which is where the Aries energy can have us constantly pushing and driving, and moving, with not always a clear sense of why. And so again, reflect on that. Sometimes it's better to conserve energy, allow things to accumulate in terms of our own inner courage, our inner awareness, our inner harmony, and then take action from that place. It's easy to, sort of flail around, just like the outer world is doing, but it's actually really creating more chaos. And that's what we say we don't want, right? So there's, this is it. It's just us in the cosmos. It's just us having this, this sense of life. It's a spiritual awareness, our spiritual self in a so-called earthly or human experience. And it's fleeting. So the Buddha taught that the way that we die is exactly who we are in this moment, however we are in this moment, and how what this next breath is feeling to you, and how you're, realizing the truth of who you are and finding that inner harmony exactly here and now. This is what the Buddha says is how you're going to die, because this moment is the foundation for every other moment. It's the foundation for the so-called future, because it's always happening now. So again, this is an opportunity with the Libra full moon to put yourself in harmony. And of course, that will be mirrored by how we are in relational dynamics. But it's not the other that you're dealing with. First and foremost, it's yourself. And when you can really see that those components are inseparable, then there's an enormous amount that you can work with, especially as the ruler of the moon itself, Venus, is happy at home in her own sign. She's co-present with Uranus for the very last time in our lifetimes. And this in and of itself will create a kind of a cycle, a lunar cycle that is unique in time, again, with this feeling of what needed to change, how have we changed since May of 2018. And as Venus approaches her conjunction on the 23rd of April, she'll conjoin Uranus at the last degree of Taurus. Venus will then slip into Gemini, and almost at the same time, just days after, 2 days later, Uranus slips into Gemini, and that is a major game changer. And we'll be coming back to talk about that again. But just notice that this is all part of the bigger change. So the more you prepare yourself inwardly and really having that clarity, this is still what we're working on with the North Node in Pisces until the third week of July. Find that inner strength, find that inner place of knowing who I am in this lifetime, in this universe, in this thoughts, recognizing the difference between a thought and the self. And this is where you'll find your strength. This is where you're going to find that, as Venus is coming up to after this full moon square Pluto, it's certainly very much in a square. She's almost 3 degrees there. Yeah, so just 2 degrees off from a square to Pluto with Ceres. We can find things challenging, but we have what we need to adapt. And one of the ways that you can, in a kind of, again, personal way of stabilizing, of finding your resilience, is to highly simplify things. Try not to complicate things. Don't, especially here in this configuration, avoid any debt, avoid getting yourself into financial Ponzi schemes and, multi-level marketing, or, when people get tense and worried, when people get afraid, and their fear is around lack, which can be part of this dynamic too. They find scams, they get into scams, whether it's Bitcoin or some other, or I should say crypto, because Bitcoin is whatever it is, but all these different scams that come up are preying on people who are not in inner alignment, and they've lost their sense of self-worth. They've lost their sense of connection to the universe, that all things that are happening without our opinion, without our contribution, and we've lost trust in that. And then it makes us do stupid things. It makes us reach out in ways that can actually be unsettling. So be careful not to, don't get yourself involved in these scams that make you heavily reliant on things that actually are very destabilizing, both psychologically or even materially. So all of that to say, this is up to the inner connection that you have, which you always have, which you were born with, which you will die with, and that is the idea of how you're being nourished constantly by the universe. There's nothing lacking. Nothing is lacking. I've seen comments in other places where people say, well, you say we never die, or the consciousness is constant, but then you talk about death. Well, there is a death. There's an embodied death. And if you're born, in terms of the sort of Aries dynamic, this is, we are born, we appear into a form, and it's that form that we leave behind. But the consciousness that we are is untouchable. And if you keep putting your energy there, what you might call Christ consciousness or Buddha nature or Shiva consciousness, this is the place that we are, that we exist from. And the mind is different to this. This is not the same thing as connecting that with the human limited persona. So this is why sometimes people get confused, because they think the two are one and the same. So there's no individuated self, no persona that reincarnates. That's just not even possible. There are experiences in consciousness that will keep repeating and moving in different dimensions. And that's where we want to place our attention. So this is what I'll leave you with here for the overview. And then we're going to go sign by sign so we can see how all of this takes shape. So let me see if I go forward a little bit here to get Aries on the ascendant. Oh, we're going to have to do it minute by minute here. And, oh, sorry, hang on. Okay, Aries there. There we go. Okay, so of course, Aries, this is a key moment in your life, because if you've got Aries, Sun, Moon, or Ascendant, or any other important placements, this is, of course, an intense moment, and it has been for a while. This is intense since certainly January, February, when Neptune and Saturn moved into your sign, but really for many years, because you've also had Chiron in your sign, and it's coming to a peak of intensity as it meets up with Eris, which has been for all of us in Aries. Eris was in Aries before we before we knew she existed, discovered in 2005. So it's just that that energy is becoming more and more intense, and it's creating this huge stellium in your sign. And that stellium is very strong throughout April because different planets are coming and going. First, we had last week, Venus was in there. So there were 7 planets there, or 6 planets, I guess, there. And if we include the moon from the week before, that was from that last week, it was also 7 planets. It gets to 8 planets as Mars comes in, and then we have Mercury coming in, and they'll stay there for a little bit longer as Mercury is just picking up speed, and Mars is relatively slow, going through for 6 weeks in its own sign. So Aries is the topic of the day, and it really is something that you will remember because this is such a dynamic moment in time historically. So you're very personally connected to what is going on historically, and all the more reason to start to look into how you are experiencing relationships. This is where the Libra full moon is happening in the opposite sign. It's very literal for Aries, as everything always is. That's why Aries is known for being very direct and very sort of self-evident. And because it's part of the natural zodiac beginning at Aries. And so here we have the moon in the 7th house, and there's an aspect of recognizing where that potential is not always very likely, but it's a potential, depending on your natal chart, for over accommodating or seeing others as more important than yourself or more influential, and not recognizing your own power to change. So again, it depends on your own natal chart, but this mirror of what we'll describe as a mirror of the moon, which reflects back the light of the sun, and this is especially true for Aries as a signature, but if you have the sun there, then you'll take this very, very literally. The sun is exalted in the sign of Aries, and here it's being mirrored in terms of relationships. So what's going on in your own experience with Saturn having just met that sun, and of course this still applies for a sun, ascendant, and moon in Aries. With Saturn on that sun, there's something here that you might doubt about yourself, or that you might have felt unreachable, more challenging. And this is now a moment to recognize, okay, I can do this. I have the capacity, and this is the person I want to engage with, or these are the ways I want to engage with other people. Now, Venus is ruling this moon from your 2nd house of money, and that's where we find Ceres as well. And it's in that square, as I mentioned earlier, to Pluto and Juno in your 11th house, which is also a money house. And that's ruled by Saturn in your house of self. So if this is something to do with money issues, or the 2nd house represents families as well, what is supporting you through family, all kinds of resources that you can draw on, including yourself as a resource, but money, possessions, income of all kinds. There might be something here that you realize you need to manage, and it's something about what you're doing about that, how you see yourself, how you see either your capacity to step up to the plate and start managing things and dealing with things, or it comes from a place of recognizing where you've doubted that, where you've needed to take on a bit more responsibility for how you're showing up. Your ruler, Mars, is in the 12th house, and that often represents a loss or a letting go of something. Again, listening to the introduction, you'll hear more about that. But Mars in the 12th, also being the ruler of the 8th house, can be something that connects you to what you're letting go of in an actual relationship. 8th house representing intimacy and the bond that you have with another person. And then the fact that Mars is in the 12th house, that it can also be a loss that might be even financial, or challenges that are financial. Then again, looking at the connection, the bigger connection around the dynamics of relationship for you, and how you might be having to step up to the plate, or you might be realizing that you've been the one kind of holding things together and that becomes more of an obstacle, becomes more difficult for you perhaps at this time. So again, not to say that it's not possible, it's just that there's something here that can feel like a big challenge, and it's going to be reflected in the way that you relate to other people. Now, Saturn also rules your 10th house of your social status, marital status, for example, or your career, or the way that you reach out into the world, your vocation, if you like. And so again, there's every part of your life is being strongly impacted here at this time. And not when I say not just this full moon, but really at this time overall. So that's something to pay attention to, because you're going to be in a dynamic of major personal upleveling to take responsibility for how your life is taking shape. And then certainly the Eris and Chiron conjunction that's been in your sign around that 24, 25, 26 degree mark, especially last week when Venus was there at the same place, that will also be showing you where things have not been in alignment between you and others, or between you and what you desire. So this can impact business relationships as well as personal ones. The relationships you might have with clients as well. Seventh house is your clients, and business partnerships and partners, and of course the marital partners are very important people in your life. So these are all the things that are being highlighted right now, and you want to look at where you feel sometimes you're stepping away from engagement, or where you're feeling perhaps you're being hard on yourself, or you're putting yourself through a lot because of the quality of what you're expecting in relationships, or what's coming back at you being mirrored from another. Certainly with the South Node still in your sixth house, as it's been for a long time, you might also still be in that phase of trying to shed ways of working, or the quality of life that you have, and finding a better quality of life. And that will come through the dynamic of, where you feel yourself to be overgiving, or in that martyr dynamic, or even in that dynamic of being frustrated in your work, but it's coming from a more psychological place of, am I able to manage this? Am I capable of this? So 100% you are capable of it, but is that the right job, or is that the right daytime sort of schedule? Are you working in the way that supports you? That's also a very important consideration right now. That would have also been part of the consideration of the Mercury retrograding in your 12th house, looking at habits and ways of engaging with your actual life in all different dimensions, but even especially on the very practical levels, and recognizing where you might sabotage your own success. And this is part of the theory, this is part of the theme rather of the Mercury retrograde in Pisces. Also, it's part of the theme of the Chiron and Eris conjunction in your first house. And those are things that you can really step into right now and take shape, so you can feel a little bit more stable in yourself, and give yourself also to the place that you are growing into with Pluto in your 11th house, trying to relate differently to the world around you, trying to relate differently to your future. And that might come through a specific person with Juno up there, but it'll certainly be a part of the picture of the relational dynamic as a whole. So we'll see in a couple of weeks, we'll see more of this development as we come to your new moon, the new moon in Aries, which is happening 2 weeks from this point. And I'll tell you more about that in a separate video. Okay, Aries, I'll see you next time. So Taurus, sun, moon, and ascendant, this is happening in your, this full moon is happening in your 6th house of your everyday life. It's the other house ruled by Venus in your chart. So your sign is ruled by Venus in the 1st house of self, and how you kind of reach out into life, how you navigate life. And that's where your ruler is right now. So it looks like things are shaping up in a way that feels more confident, more like yourself. You're finding yourself again, or you're finding your way forward in a way that you weren't so sure of just even a week ago. Things are all moving ahead. All the planets are moving in the forward direction for the next couple of weeks, until Pluto goes retrograde at the beginning of May. So this is also an opportunity for you to recognize all these things that might feel like they've been holding you back, or worrying you in some way, maybe causing some kind of anxiety or restlessness in your own experience. or things that are happening at a distance, maybe people that you know from far away, or even in terms of your spiritual connection, spiritual relating, let's say, to your life or to you, maybe to ancestors as well. So all of this is something that you're focusing on at the same time as you focus on yourself now in your everyday life. So do listen to the introduction because it's a big part of this story, especially since Venus is your ruler and she's now in your sign and she's ruling the Libra full moon. So you can relate in different ways to that. Now, these signs don't see each other. So it's a very interesting thing that these planets that rule each other, the two different signs, they never see the other sign actually. It's considered an inconjunct or a quincunx aspect from sign to sign. And so there's an element of this which is going to require a bit of a leap of faith or a recognition of a way of changing and adjusting your behavior in such a way that you can feel better about how your everyday life is showing up. And you might find that with that 12th house emphasis so strong, that there's aspects of yourself, especially if you're holding yourself back or you're thinking from this place of insecurities that might go really deep. They can be unconscious. They can be patterns that are, childhood patterns or things that you feel like you just are ready to give up on. That's all that 12th house energy. That's something that is also challenging you to recognize how that's impacting your everyday health and life. The moon represents your health, your mental health, your physical health, and your day-to-day schedule, of course, is the sixth house. And of course the dynamic with others, and that can include, colleagues, for example, at work or people who work for you. So a lot of this is calling you to introspect. It's coming from this deeper hidden place in your chart. And at the same time, there's a lot of vision forward because of Mars being in the 11th house with Mercury on the North Node, and both Venus and Ceres, of course, squaring Juno and Pluto. So there's a lot that is calling you outwards at this time into your future, into the way that you might feel secure around what you do or how you show up in the world or what you need to do, what you need to feel materially secure, which is always a big thing with the Taurus Scorpio axis, or what you need to feel emotionally secure, and to recognize that. And so it looks like with the sixth house moon at this time, reflecting back what might be described as boring stuff. It's how do I operate day to day? How do I take care of myself day to day? It's actually a foundational part of your life, taking care of your health, observing how you are maybe overgiving or doing things for people that end up costing you energy or costing you your own goals, for example. All of this since February has been what you've been contemplating. This is not new stuff. It's just that this is the focus right now in your sixth house, bringing a lot of that to your attention. And this is the last time that Venus, which is your ruler, will be in the same house, in this first house of self with Uranus. So you're moving in a very new direction. It's going to be, of course, like all the rest of us, but you personally are going to be freed of this instability and the constant need to change and adapt that is brought by this Uranus in your first house. It moves into your second house, your values, finances, possessions, finding insights and change and freshness going into that part of your life, perhaps change around family, all kinds of dynamics that can show up. It would, I need to see your natal chart to see how that would impact you. But these are the things that you can look at and say, okay, look at the last 7, 8 years of my life, how potently I've changed, how much has changed, and where am I in terms of my internal relationship to self and taking responsibility for my own mental state, my psychological or physiological state as well, and recognizing how that's impacting my everyday health and life, how I'm able to show up and do things in my life. So this is a big time for you to ask these questions of the individual actions that I'm taking and how that's impacting my future, my vision for my life. Equally, of course, you've got a lot of support with Jupiter now direct in your third house, and that's it's trining, receiving a trine from Mercury. Now it received last week a trine from Mars. And that receptivity from the Mercury to Jupiter is also working from the place of my everyday willpower and choice, which is the third house. And having that sense of what are my short-term goals, what are my commitments now, what do I need to take care of, and perhaps with whom in the third house. It could be around siblings or neighbors, but also relating to by rulership, Jupiter ruling the North Node, Mercury and Mars in your house of the future or in your house of society. It also represents your sort of acquaintances and the networks you spend time with, or the things that you are grappling with in terms of an audience, for example, or your fans or your people who follow you. And so it's the everyday choices. It's the square from Jupiter back to the moon that is tying in this every sort of incremental thing that you're doing or the goals that you set that are also feeding out into that vision for how you interact with either the future or the vision you hold for your future, but also with people who are listening to you, following you, learning from you as well. Jupiter in the third would be a great teacher, and especially practical skills-based teaching, which is Taurus's forte. So these are things that you want to really start to clarify, because as all of that energy from Aries starts to move into your house, it gives you this feeling of a boost of energy that takes you out into the world once Taurus season begins. And the sun will be there, and then eventually we get Mercury there and Mars, and then Chiron in June. So you're preparing yourself, as you have been for months, to move out into a new direction. So this is not only about this moment in time, it's a preparatory phase. And getting this right, based on the last cycle of the last 3 years, that you can listen about in the introduction, is going to help you a lot as you go forward into the next 3 years. All right, so I will wish you all the best with that, Taurus, and I'll see you in the next video. So hello, Gemini. We're having a look here for the Sun, Moon, and Ascendant in Gemini, and this lunation is trinal to you. It's in the fifth house from Gemini. So it's a Libra moon in the fifth house ruled by a Venus in the 12th house. So there could be something that you're realizing about how you express yourself or your creative self, or projects that might involve creativity, anything from a child all the way through a business project, or just simply how you express yourself, maybe even artistically. And with Venus in the 12th house, she's in really strong dignity, but you might be realizing some aspects of how you are hiding a part of yourself with this energy. Your ruler, Mercury, is at the top of your chart and now direct, which is really, really helpful. I'd say this would have been quite an intense Mercury retrograde for Geminis, because Mercury was also connecting so frequently with Mars and the North Node in different phases of this retrograde cycle. So it put a lot of intense pressure on the way you show up out in the world and your personal ambitions. And this moon is showing you something about what makes you happy, and in the way that you express your happiness and the way you express yourself. So there's a lot here that's very, very positive for you, but it may come after a moment of intense pressure as well, that you might have been feeling quite a lot of pressure. You might be feeling quite a lot of pressure around the future, because all of these planets in Aries are in your house of the future, the vision that you have for your life, and the things that you'd like to do going forward in time, where Pluto itself is still in that space of what am I doing in my life as a life purpose, or what we call the dharma, the purpose and the life path that we want to choose. So it's probably a good time to reflect on how people are reflecting back to you, how you show up in your honest, open self, and recognizing any patterns that might be coming to the surface, let's say with Venus in your 12th house, around things that you might be worried about in terms of security, relational security. With Gemini, one of the things that's always really important to look at is any degree of changeability or superficiality around relating. And especially in this case, with your ruler not in very strong dignity at the top of your chart, there might be something here about how you're showing up with people in authority, or the way that people perceive you, let's say, And it would be a really good thing to reflect on. And do I have a good balance between being serious and being frivolous, being flippant and being engaged, let's say, in what I'm doing or what relationship I'm working on, especially as we're talking about the Libra moon here. So all of these things are kind of turning around in the background. And as Venus herself is for the very last time with Uranus in your 12th house, they're both preparing just 3 weeks from this point to go into your first house of self. So do look at this question, because as you are going forward in the next 7 years or so, Uranus is going to change how you show up in the world in so many different ways. And you're getting all kinds of ideas around, what is it that I want? How do I want to communicate myself and who I am? How do I want to be seen? How do I want to connect with people? Mercury is always about relationships of all kinds, connections and exchanges of all kinds through different relational dynamics. And especially because of this Venus 12th house connection to your 5th house, there might be even something that is about going away, far away, or on the contrary, going inwards and going either abroad and somewhere at a distance from you, or going deeper inwards, or even to an extent working in a way that feels like you're going into a more private space. And that can be something as literal as doing research or working in a clinic or working in an environment that's a bit withdrawn or away from public view. Or it can be you personally, and that you want to take a step back and look within. And as you look within, you're finding yourself, expressing yourself. So the 5th house is also love, romance, and the partnerships that you are working with. And Venus in the 12th house can also reveal something of a quality, of a romantic engagement, a romantic relationship that is coming to your attention. If it's something that might be hidden from other people, maybe because the relationship is very young and you're not ready to say anything about it, you might be realizing now would be the right time to start to talk about it or let people know this person matters to me. And that's something you might be preparing as Venus goes through your 12th house. If there's something that's going on that where there's a sense that there's something that's not really meant to be discovered by other people, this Mercury retrograde will have revealed something about that. So there may have been something that you would have preferred to keep secret, or that your status not be public, but that may not have been possible because at the beginning of this Mercury retrograde, Venus was in your 10th at the same time as Mercury started on the 26th to turn around, go retrograde. So definitely something to consider there, because that might also cause some kind of reputational strain or a strain in a potential relationship that's ongoing on either side of that transaction. So just saying to mind what's going on very carefully. Jupiter's in your 2nd house. It's very helpful for money or sorting out money issues, for investing, because the moon is in your 5th and Jupiter is in your 2nd. The 5th house is investment. The only thing I would say is be careful, because Venus is again in the 12th house, which can represent loss. And so if you're thinking about investing or going in a different direction or taking a bit of a risk in some way, it might be an emotional risk. And then, of course, in that sense, things will take their course. But if it's a financial risk, just beware, don't be overconfident. So really start to look at different things that are really keeping the long-term picture in mind. You do have a lot of energy in this vision for the future area of your chart. And a lot of that can connect you also to people that you might consider to be acquaintances or people in a network of, whether it be people who follow you or that you integrate with because of a particular project or an idea. There's an enormous amount of activity there. And so you might also find that you're getting maybe mixed signals from people in those groups that makes you a little bit more withdrawn, that you pull yourself a little bit back. It's a bit tricky having Saturn Neptune up in the 11th house, especially with Chiron Aries. And last week Venus was with Chiron and Aries, so you may have had some encounters with people that had you wondering if you're with the right people, and then you come right back to that moon in the 5th house around, what do I need to be happy? How do I feel that happiness? The 4th is understanding how I feel secure and how I can feel emotionally and psychologically sound. And the 5th house is how you express that. And so again, with your ruler up at the top of the chart and having just come off the retrograde cycle, this would be a really good time to look back over these last few weeks and see what you really, instinctively know about how you want to show up and with whom. It might be time to be more selective around the groups that you're spending time with, or that you deliberately start to really hone in on a group that is matching exactly who you are in this moment. And that goes a long way to supporting your vision for your future as well. So best wishes for this, Gemini, and I'll see you in the next video. Cancer, Jupiter is still in your sign and it's ruling the Mercury now direct at the top of the ninth house, where we also find Mars. And Mercury is at this time preparing for a trine, which will be the next day after this full moon. And the moon itself is in your fourth house of home. And you can consider that your literal home. Where do you live? What's the circumstances around your living space or property or housing, but it can also be your metaphorical home and what makes you feel secure, what makes you feel happy. And for that, we want more answers from Venus. And here what we have is Venus with Eris up in the 11th house. And she's in this building, this square to Pluto and Juno. So there's something coming up from the 11th back to the 8th house, where there's a tie-in, perhaps with something of money related topics, because the 11th house is money. It's big money that you might be able to receive from what you do. It's like the money that comes in from the business that you run, for example, or if you're self-employed, that's kind of where the money is coming in. Or it can be that you're getting support from places that are more generalized. It could be a person or an audience or people that that follow you or that are part of your dynamic in terms of your work. And then Pluto is in that 8th house area, which can be something to do with issues around taxes, issues around government monies, money that comes through inheritance. And again, Venus is comfortable there in Taurus in her own sign. And soon, in like 3 weeks after this full moon, she's going to be with Uranus just before they cross into the 12th house. So there can be an element of having to go through a crisis in the 8th house, whether that be actually a loss of somebody in your life that brings about some money that can be through an inheritance. And then Venus, through the course of April, as she connects with Uranus, and then as they both move into your 12th house, of, again, representing issues around loss, there may be something that's coming through a loss, or could also be not necessarily even payment that comes through an inheritance, but from a severance payout from a job that you're leaving. So these are all possible as well. And the moon being in the fourth house can have you feeling a little bit unsettled because, ironically, although it's the house of Cancer in the natural zodiac, the moon is not very comfortable in the fourth house because since there's a waxing and a waning in the property of the moon itself, it's much more difficult to manage as the moon is in this house that is supposed to be providing stability. And so it can also indicate, especially as it's squaring Jupiter from your first house, it's creating a T-square with the full moon where the sun is in opposition in the 10th house, exalted. There can be some unsettled energy around home. And again, that can be the metaphorical home or it can be the actual home. And at the very least, there's a lot of tension between your capacity, let's say your psychological or physiological even capacity to do what you need to do, and the things that you feel pressured to do, which is all of this 10th house energy coming from career or potentially through marriage or social demands on you, or your own aspirations for that matter. And so there's a lot here that can feel emotionally disruptive, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just an awareness. Where am I out of balance? Where am I not in harmony with my need for cutting back and being private and being calm, which is a typical Cancer need. The fourth house is like where you put your pajamas on and put your slippers on and have a cup of tea before bed. This is where you pull yourself away from the busyness of the world and where you come into your comfort zone. And so the moon, which is your ruler, is really kind of asking that question. And then with the rulership of Venus from the house of the future or friends or acquaintances or networks of support, it's asking, who's providing that comfort for you? Are you able to surround yourself by the people that you need to rely on? Are you able to reconnect with people that can help you feel that you're not withdrawing, but rather you're resourcing yourself, you're re-nourishing yourself? And the fact that also you've got this recent connection between Chiron and Eris, also in the 10th house, is reminiscent of the really big energy that has been there in the 10th house with Saturn initially conjoining Neptune in February, then Venus came along, and then the Sun has come along, all in the week prior to this full moon. And some of that tension or that feeling of pressure can have been really, really strong. And now that Venus is out into the 11th house, there can be a feeling of the pressure valve is releasing. And this could be something that you're just sort of recovering. And the moon in the fourth would be a really good time to consciously choose self-help, self-care, self-nourishment. And especially with Jupiter in your first house, it's a busy year. It's a big year with all of the energy in the 10th house for Cancer, pulling you out into the world, pulling you out into an area of responsibility, what you feel responsible for. And part of that sort of motivation at the moment is where you feel you're using your talents or your skills the best. Mars is ruling the 10th house from the 9th house, and it's one of the only exceptions to the rule of a 12th house planet not supporting the house that it rules. So if the ruler of a house is 12 houses away from that sign, then it usually detracts from that sign. And the one real exception to this rule is that when a planet is in the 9th house ruling the 10th house, it actually provides the support, because the 9th house is like the power behind the throne. It's the counselor, the advisor, the guru, the teacher, the wise counsel, and it's supporting what's going on in your 10th house. So keep drawing on that sense of your higher purpose. The Mars cycle at this particular moment, on top of the Mercury retrograde cycle, on top of the fact that both had conjoined the North Node recently over the last month, this is a big opportunity for you to really embody your sense of why you're here and work towards that. And it's going to come with that feeling of drive and motivation that will support all of the feeling of hard work and the need to get busy that's there in the 10th house. And the moon is just saying, are you okay? Are you managing? Are you able to get rest? Are you taking care of your mental and physical and emotional health? And again, with Venus there, along with Ceres in this square to Juno, square to Pluto, it looks like there may be some compromises necessary that still will bring you benefit, because Venus herself is just doing beautifully up there in her own sign and supporting this fourth house that she's ruling at the time of this full moon. So I feel like this can be extremely positive, although I do know for sure, being also Cancer moon and ascendant, that this is a busy time and we just have to work our way through April. It is going to be busy, and that doesn't have to mean bad. It just means that there's a need to be conscious about self-care, because it's going to be easy to be pulled in different directions. And the dynamic around the pulling can also be relating to money and pressures around money. The sun itself was this week before the Libra full moon. You'll hear that in the introduction. The sun, which rules your second house of money, was with Saturn, and Saturn dulls the sun. Although the sun is very strong and eventually bounces back, Saturn and the sun, when they connect, the sun feels depleted. It's not as strong. And it's now that the sun is separating away at the time of this full moon that we can start to feel that energy coming back, and more clarity and more determination. And a new cycle, a new synodic cycle between Saturn and the sun has taken place, meaning that now there's a sense of purpose and mission, and it's directly tied to this 10th house. That can be, again, with reference to your social status or your career or sort of vocation status. But it's a whole new cycle, and this cycle will repeat a year from now when the sun comes back, still in Aries season, but in 2027 with Saturn there, and they will create a new annual cycle from that point on. But this one happens to be hot on the heels of the Saturn Sun cycle is hot on the heels, or anticipating rather the full moon. So you're getting to see really starkly what this new cycle requires of you, how you need to take care of yourself, because the moon is the ruler of Jupiter. So it's very clearly telling you your connections to either your self-care or rest, or ending something, because this is also a full moon theme. It's coming to a culmination point, especially the fourth house also representing endings in different ways. Something might be ending that is maybe a good thing for you, but it may still require a certain amount of effort uh, or finding new sort of land legs, as it were. So with the square from Jupiter, it's with the T square from Jupiter to this full moon being in your first house, Jupiter is really supporting you in this. So whatever this is about, you have capacity. Just keep remembering that you have capacity and you have the vision. Mercury is trining Jupiter, giving you a vision. Last week, it was Mars trining Jupiter, giving you courage and a feeling of going forward with a purpose. So a lot of this can work in your favor. And a lot of it is, of course, on the background of big changes, societal changes that we just have to get our heads around. And just keep holding that space for what it is that we can contribute and what we can do. And to be able to do that, Cancer, you want to fill the tank. And I really feel like this is the biggest meaning for Cancers, is this moon in the fourth house. One other aspect of this that's just coming to me now, of course, fourth house represents, at least the way I see it, the fourth house is the mother, the foundation of the family and the roots that you've come through, the family of origin as well, and the moon is there. I tend to see the Indian way. The fourth house is mother, the ninth house is father, the 10th house is the parents. And so you might also find that there's something that you're having to grapple with, again, perhaps connected to the notion of inheritance, which is something that you're becoming aware of with reference to one or another of your parents, most especially your mom. But it doesn't mean that you're going to lose a parent. It just means that there might be something that you, or maybe you as a parent, are having to grapple with. And this is also a part of the bigger change that you're dealing with around what home and family feels like to you. All right, I will leave it there. I would need to see your chart to know any more details about that. But I wish you all the best, Cancer, and I'll see you in the next video. Leo, sun, moon, and ascendant. Every lunation is built of the moon and the sun in their interplay. And here, the sun is in the ninth house for you, exalted. And so this is very strong. Your ruler is trinal, exalted in a very, very good place, and now just managing to get away from the dark cloud of Saturn, which dims the light of the sun. But it's a new cycle that began for you that is now being reflected where the moon is itself in its joy. So the sun is in its joy in the ninth, the moon is in its joy in the third house. And this creates a really beautiful pattern of something that you're understanding, maybe a new mission or a new purpose or a new sense of what you need to take action on. It can be related to people specifically in the area of your extended family or your local space, neighbors, even cousins, this kind of people, and something that might have to do with business, commerce, exchanges of all kinds. You're becoming aware. So this is a peak moment when the sun and moon are in opposition. There's an awareness, maybe even a culmination of something. That culmination doesn't mean things come to a specific ending necessarily, but there's a phase that is culminating that you are aware of. And then there's a phase of the anticlimax where the moon is waning, and then you're starting to realize what it is that you've already done or need to release and need to move into a new phase when the new moon phase starts 2 weeks after that. And that new moon will be also in your ninth house with the exalted sun dominating the moon at that time. So this is a theme you want to keep your eyes on here. There might be something in the third house about communicating something important, a message, maybe communicating through what you do or how you do what you do, especially because Venus, which is ruling the third house where the moon is also up in your 10th house, which she also rules. And so it's very helpful when you have Venus up there at the 10th house for Leo, because she's adding some real charm, hopefulness, ease up in the house of career or vocation or your social status and reputation. How people see you is the 10th house, but also how you see your own sort of life goals. What are your ambitions? That's the 10th house as well. So something based on this relational dynamic, maybe a new contract, maybe a new agreement, can be coming through now. And in this lunar cycle, it starts to play itself out. Venus and Ceres are together and they're squaring Pluto, which is in your house of relationship, and where Juno is approaching a conjunction with Pluto. So there can be something really significant going on in terms of a relational dynamic that impacts either your marriage or the quality of a relationship that you're in, or a dynamic of some kind of professional relationship that can be related to a client, or it can be related to a partner that you work with in business. We've got Mercury now direct in your eighth house and moving away from the North Node, but it's still very close all through this week around the full moon, still very close to the North Node. And there's still maybe some things that are not very clear, but are in the process of clarifying, with Mars in the eighth house, plus the Mercury retrograde having been there, and the North Node continuing to be there until the third week of July, which is your birthday season. Then there's something here that you might find interesting around intimacy or shared resources, where there may be something that needs to be reviewed. There can be some discussions or challenges around that with Mars there. And there can be also something that needs to be more activated. It can be, something that makes you feel more connected, more intimate with somebody else. And that can be both, sexual and psycho-emotional. It doesn't have to be only sexual intimacy, but it's whatever you connect with another in a deep way. Equally, because we've got this, last journey of Venus through your 10th house, she's going to be meeting up with Uranus on the 23rd of the month. So a week after, or less than a week after, the new moon that's happening in Aries. Venus and Uranus are going to join up at the last degree of your 10th house for the last time in pretty much our lifetimes. And then they, first Venus, then Uranus, move into your 11th house of the future. And that includes gains as well. And that's a really lovely place to sort of retroactively or retrofit what you're doing today. So you're going towards the future based on what you're understanding now in the more hidden parts of your chart. The eighth house also references fears as well. This could be financial fears or issues around sustaining yourself, especially because Venus Ceres is squaring that Pluto and Juno. There may be something in a relational dynamic that is causing some financial disruption or worry. But the fact that Venus and Uranus are leaving your 10th house is really also telling you that the change, or the let's say the constant change, the disruption of what has been going on in your house of your reputation and your perhaps even the marital status and your career path, it's all calming down from this point on as Uranus goes into the 11th house, where it's going to have an impact much more on your social connections, your networks, and your vision for the future. So you will find that you'll be able to get a little bit more stability in terms of the structure, let's say, of your outer life, and doing that from the inside out at this time. The third house represents the mind, and the moon represents the mind. And so that's why the moon is in its joy in the third house. So there's also a lot of wise thinking, let's say, with a good, strong Venus, both angular and in the 10th, and angular in the 10th and in her own sign, and ruling this moon. So there's clarity of purpose. There's a desire that you're clear on and that you want to go for, and do try and make the link between where you are now and how you want to get into that future and that vision of the future with Uranus going into the 11th. And especially because the third house is also a social house. It's where you connect with people, with ideas as well, all kinds of communication, and then even literally your neighbors and extended family. Where Uranus and Venus will be moving into in the 11th house is also a social house. And again, think about this as preparing this shift, preparing a change in your connection to society itself, or to a particular group of people, or a connection through a networking or something like that, or even your audience, because also we're looking at the third house being also a teaching house in opposition to the 9th house related to sort of higher-minded teaching, where your ruler is. And then the 11th house being the audience and who's paying attention, who's following you. and where you get your sort of reputation and fame exposed. So the 10th house is your reputation, and you take it out into the 11th house, and that's where people respond to you based on that. So there's a lot you can plan with here, and a lot of it is coming from a vision that you might have of how you interact in a very social way. I see this as something that can be really positive for you because all of these aspects are really supportive. Jupiter is in the 12th and squaring the moon at this time and trining back to Mercury, and that's exact just after this full moon. And it already last week was in a trine from Mars to Jupiter from your 8th back to the 12th. So there could be quite a lot that you're learning about yourself or your spiritual understanding of why you're here, especially because your ruler and so many other things are in the 9th house, which is about purpose. It's your higher purpose or your sense of dharma, your sense of why am I alive? And this is a big, big deal. And the 8th house trining to the 12th house carries a lot of that signature of deep understanding, a depth of understanding human psychology, understanding maybe relational trauma or other types of trauma, inherited trauma from the family, but reconnecting perhaps with people from far away or reconnecting with ancestors who may have passed as well, because the 12th house is also with reference to that. So there's a lot here you can work with and grow through from the inside out, as I said, that will bring you out into this bigger, a different place as the season moves on. And as for sure, after Uranus goes into your 11th house and really remodels your relationship to society and your relationship to your vision for your future. So work on, balancing out those relational dynamics in all different ways in such a way that it supports this bigger vision that you're developing now. Maybe it's an issue of communicating things in a new or different way, or maybe it's an issue of being able to find your place as a person in the bigger dynamic of relationship. But it's a huge topic for you and going forward for many years to come. All right, so Leo, make the most of this, and I'll see you in the next video. So Virgo, this is happening in this new moon is happening in your money house. And this is a place where you might receive income, or it's money that supports you, that is coming from investments, for example, or things, possessions that you have, the attitude that you might have towards those things. But it's the house of value in a general sense. It's the house of how you value things and how you feel your own value. And there's a lot to support money issues here. There's a lot of potential work around money issues here. From the 8th house, which is shared resources, and being reflected back from the 2nd house, which is your resources. And the 2nd house is also your values and in opposition to the values of others. And that might be others that come through an inherited family story, or it could be your spousal or equivalent relationship values and how those might be lining up. So there's definitely been a lot of reflection because your ruler, Mercury, has been retrograding in your house of relationship, going back and forth over the topic of relationship and how that might feel to either of you, especially you, and what might be necessary to review or now change as Mercury has gone through that cycle. And by the 5th or 6th of April, it's out of the shadow. I think it's the 6th of April, is out of the shadow zone, meaning it's going past the point at which it actually started its retrograde on the 26th of February. So Mars is also there and has been for several weeks in your house of relationship. And that's also a dynamic of real busyness, activity, contribution, and negotiation potentially around relating. And so there may have been some issues that needed to be refined, pardon me, and it could also be that you were either getting some attitude from people or you were giving attitude to people. So, pardon me, we also have Jupiter. Jupiter is being trined by your ruler. Sorry about that. And the trine from Jupiter back to, or rather from Mercury back to Jupiter, which rules Mercury, has been super supportive. It's your ruler trining Jupiter is bringing a fabulous opportunity for new ideas, but new connections, with other people. At the time of this new moon, what you're highlighting is everything that supports you, and that can include friends or what you might consider to be like people in high places, well-placed support individuals of, some kind of renown or some kind of facility that help you get to where you need to go. And that's sort of the symbolism of Jupiter in the 11th, where people who are well placed to serve and help are really reaching out, especially because you have Jupiter here in such strong dignity all the way through till the end of June. And the fact that now your ruler is trining that Jupiter, which it has done before, that was part of the retrograde cycle, except now it's direct, and you're getting a lot of support. So that can be support through friends, support through a dynamic of business relationships that takes you a little further along your path in your career as a preparation for this bigger phase of change where you're going to get Uranus moving into your 10th house. So Venus herself is in a square to Pluto. Venus is in the 9th house, very strong right now in her own sign, ruling this moon. And the 9th house represents your sense of purpose and your motivations, your higher motivations, your dharma. It's also good counsel, people who can help you. And she's squaring Pluto from your 6th house. So there's some tension there where maybe you're getting, a picture of where it is that you want to go, especially with the Jupiter being so strong right now, your ruler now direct after having encountered the North Node and then Mars on a couple of occasions. And so you're starting to get really clear about different relationships and dynamics around that and how that will impact your personal motivations and goals. And certainly with Venus, with Ceres in your 9th house and squaring back to the 6th, you might also be wondering if your purpose can sustain you financially, or does it also match up with the values that you have, which the moon is showing you quite literally in both cases. Pluto is anyway asking you to change your everyday life, and that can be also how you show up for your own health, how you take care of yourself. It will definitely reflect back to you any issues of health. And the 2nd house also represents the things you consume of all kinds, whether it be intoxicants or food. All those things that you consume are part of the 2nd house, and this could also be something that you're realizing now. This feeling of awareness of the mind-body complex, which is also represented by the moon, that is helping you also to see what you need to do differently here with the Pluto being squared by Ceres and Venus. So for your own longer term vision. And then, of course, we have all of this energy in your 8th house, and that's uncomfortable because it's not seeing the ascendant. So that 8th house is in conjunct to you, or quincunx is another way of saying that, just as Pluto is. And so there's a lot of pressure on you in the places that require your conscious effort. So it's not necessarily flowing or easy at this time, and especially because that involves Pluto on the one hand, and then Chiron Eris combining together, which they have done really since middle of March or even the whole month of March. There's a lot that you're healing. There's something that is showing itself as a wound, a potential wound, or something that you're realizing has been a source of pain, whether it's your own identity or whether it's the way that you're seeing your role within an intimate relationship, where you're dealing with some level of crisis, whether it's a psychological or a family-related crisis or a financial crisis. This is the area, the 8th house, where things happen in ways that feel really big and feel really sudden, and they completely remodel who you think you are. They change, they especially with Saturn in the 8th house, it tests you to be stronger. It tests you to be more resilient. And this is something that you can really look at with this new moon here in the 2nd house. What are my resources? What supports me? Get really clear. And is that person or those things and that money and my achievement and my ambition in that 9th house way, is that supporting the thing that I need to be able to go through with the plans that I have for myself? Again, the Jupiter having big visions for the future, and lots of really great support from other people. So beware that this is all a kind of a preparatory cycle to take you up and out into the world as you go forward through the year. because now we're going to have, and even over the next couple of years, but now we're going to have very quickly after this, so just less than 3 weeks after, Venus conjoins Uranus, and then both move into your 10th house by the 26th of the month. And this is where it's all systems go. Your change is really noticeable in terms of your relational dynamics, or the sort of marital status, or married, single, parent, not parent, whatever. Your relationship with your parents potentially changing, or as a parent if you are one. And also especially your career goals and ambitions, which can be dramatically changing in the years ahead. And I can pretty much guarantee it, where you're going to find yourself in a space of something very different that you hadn't probably seen yourself as before, and now suddenly something changes and you can see it, and this is the new direction. So this is what you're preparing for, based on how you find the things that support you, and most especially based on your values, the values and what you find most important, that's going to sustain you going through this bigger cycle of this Libra full moon. All right, so Virgo, make the most of this, and I will see you in the next video. Libra, well, this, of course, is all about you. And actually, I'm going to just come right back to the original. Let me come right back to the original chart so we can put you better on the ascendant here, because the moon is starting to get a little far away. And there we go. So we've got Libra on the moon, but now the moon is approaching. So actually the full moon is technically on the 2nd. You'll see that in the beginning of this video. And now we've got the moon approaching its fullness on the 1st over into the 2nd. So here, Libra, this is your full moon of the year. Usually we get one at least. And you're looking at yourself now, that you're seeing through the relational dynamics, what's going on in the life of others, and how you feel you have been perhaps called outwards into the lives of others, or what you need to do to sort of reach out into relationships with others, and how that's reflecting on you, most especially in terms of your emotional life, or your awareness, just awareness of self. And it's highlighting something that is unavoidable. Jupiter's at the top of your chart, and it's creating a T-square to this formation. So the lunation itself is in opposition, and then Jupiter is squaring that, and it creates this T-square. Let's see if we can move it ahead. Oops, we can't. I'll move it by a few minutes and see if we can get that more in alignment. And so there, what we have is this push and pull between your house of self and relationship, and the bigger sort of choice point is coming from the Jupiter that's at the top of the chart. And that Jupiter is telling you, this is the thing that I'm looking for. This is the status that I want. This is the ambition I have for either my marital status, my social status, my work status, my sense of what I'm hoping to leave, let's say, to leave to a legacy for my children, for society, how I want to contribute. It's a big deal, because Jupiter rules your house of everyday work, what you do every day and how you do it. And so there's a direct connection, since it's pulling the energy from the 10th into the 6th from that rulership, and the moon itself is in your sign, and it's the moon that rules Jupiter. So this is about you and your personal goals and status and what it is that you want to achieve. Venus is in your 8th house of intimacy. It's a place where we confront our intimate fears as well, and that can also be around financial issues, or around sexual or emotional or psychological things that we need to deal with. But Venus is really strong here. She's in a really good position, and she's in a square to Pluto, and Pluto is in the house, it's trinal to you, in the 5th house of your self-expression, and how you're creating, and how you're working through what it is that you want to express in this lifetime. And again, it can be a project like a child having a baby, or having a project in the form of a job, or a business enterprise, or a literal creative project. All of this can be taking shape right now. And something about Venus is revealing what you're receiving for it. It's about how you're either receiving intimate support, or connection and support, maybe even direct financial support, because Venus, of course, is your ruler. So this is you receiving that. And either way, it's extremely helpful, and it's linked to how you show up. It can be linked to how you express love with that fifth house connection. This is love and romance and all the joyful things. And Pluto is really pushing you to be there, to really be you, to be really present. So if you haven't actually listened to the introduction, it's almost tailor-made for you because of this particular configuration, and it's definitely something you want to keep in mind in a general sense because of the balance between Aries and Libra, that it's always going to be strong in your life for Libra, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. And so this dynamic here is very, very much about how you're conducting yourself every day based on what it is that you feel you're ready to receive, or that you recognize needs to be modified, enabled to enable yourself to receive. So you actually achieve the goal, the 10th house goal of the Jupiter that is up there. That's your potential, your highest potential. There's been no doubt a lot of tweaking and difficulty and compromise in the house of relationship, where there may have even been some doubt, or there may have been some things that needed to be worked through in the last certainly 2 months, and maybe let's say 6 weeks for sure. And this is again going to be to a greater or lesser extent depending on your natal chart, but that's part of the theme that's here. And it's going to continue to be a theme from most of April into May, even because Mars will still be there. So there's a lot of activity in this dynamic aspect of who you relate to, but also how. And most importantly, how do they relate back to you? So the moon is a mirror, and you're getting a chance to really see that the moon is the reflected light of the sun. And the sun is showing you here with the other across the way from you, how the other is impacting your life. So for some of you, this is going to be a realization that this is not working for me, that I'm actually liberating myself from something that doesn't feel appropriate in relationship. And that becomes something that brings you all the benefits that we can see when your ruler is there in her very strong placement, but in the eighth house. So it can be that the better thing comes through change that feels like a crisis. And again, that crisis in the eighth house sense can also mean perhaps losing somebody, but also in the way of having to say goodbye, the final goodbye as somebody's passing. Again, I would need to see your chart to be able to clarify what all of these things could be. I'm just trying to give ideas of the potentials here. Certainly, there's a lot of focus on your everyday work and health domain, with Mercury having been retrograde there. Now it's direct, so you're much more clear. It's trining Jupiter from your sixth house of your everyday and your work, your health, your overall sort of day-to-day capacity to overcome things, and bringing benefit up into the 10th house. So it's all, I see it all as very supportive. But again, listening to the introduction, making sure that you're recognizing where you might at times be undermining yourself because of the way that you don't recognize your own strength, or you don't, or you're maybe afraid to work with what anger feels like to you. With Mars in the sixth house, that's actually a great placement to have Mars. Mars in the sixth helps you overcome all kinds of day-to-day things and even health struggles and things like that. And the fact that it's also ruled by Jupiter in such strong dignity at the top of your chart, if you have health issues, if you have any kind of crisis or something that you need to really grapple with, this is the best support you can find. Even with Venus being in the eighth house, if it's some kind of counseling support that you might feel, you want to reach out to somebody, get advice, that's also really, really working in your favor. It's really supportive right now. So your ruler, Venus, is going to be merging with Uranus on the 23rd. So, what is that, 3 weeks after this lunation, Venus and Uranus will meet for the last time in your eighth house. And that puts both of them into your ninth house, Venus almost immediately after the 23rd, and then Uranus on the 26th of April. And that changes everything. So you can recall back in July, the 7th of July no, it was just before. So the week before the 7th, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th of July, Venus and Uranus conjoined in exactly the same way, and both at the same time entered into your ninth house. So you can see that this will carry a seed of something that you already saw last year. but it's going to be magnified because now we've got Jupiter in really strong dignity, where previously it was also in Gemini, it was not in the same place. And so your perspective has shifted a lot. So whatever you learned from that immediate shift in July last year, you're now, or wait, Jupiter was from the 9th of June. So in fact, Jupiter had just moved into your 10th house. So it was already there. Sorry, so that's not true. Jupiter had already just moved out of Gemini, then Venus and Uranus moved in, and now we carry the same signature, but Jupiter is at the peak of its exaltation, and you've also had most of the transit of Jupiter in your 10th house to show you what are my ambitions, how do I want to reach out, and that will be when Venus brings all of this deeper understanding of your values and what you need and how you want to go forward with that out into the 9th house, and expanding your sense of faith in yourself or your sense of connection with higher meaning, higher purpose, and trining back to you. So bringing a lot of support in, even though she'll no longer be in her sign, she's in a more favorable position to be able to help you. And this is something to work with deliberately and consciously as we go through through April. And then once we get into May, Venus and Uranus are fully in your 9th house. And so the preparation that you do right now is going to help you launch yourself come the last week of April into May. Right, I think I said it all here. So good luck with that, Libra, and I will see you in the next video. Scorpio, this is for Scorpio Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. The Moon itself is happening in your 12th house, and it's in opposition to your 6th house where the Sun is. That's always a full moon configuration. And your ruler Mars is ruling the Sun on the opposite side of the Moon from the 5th house. So there's a lot here that looks like a bit of hard work that requires you to put a bit of your creative expression into it. The Mars is trinal to you, so very supportive, very creative. And Mercury itself is now direct, also in the same house. So you've been picking up on a lot of ideas around your creative self, but also what you need to be happy. Your ruler in the 5th house is showing you this is how I need to be fulfilled and happy and self-expressed. And a part of that is to be physically active, and another part of that might be around how you relate sexually, emotionally, romantically. That's also part of this dynamic in the 5th, especially because Mercury is in the 5th ruling the 8th. And then Jupiter, which is in the 9th house, is trinal to all of this, supporting that by rulership and trinal to you. So whatever this new moon is about, you're already juiced up and ready to get down to business. There's something really, really exciting for you, or something that you're really ready, but it's going to come with a bit of effort because there's so much going on in the 6th house that is really asking a lot of details, a lot of work, or a lot of issues that might come through, even literal health issues, things that might pose at the very least, a contemplation around how you're living and does that support your health. And then the moon in the 12th house is also showing you how you might be undermining your overall health, and you might be undermining the bigger vision that you have for what you're doing by overdoing it. Mars rules your 6th house, and Scorpio is known for really pushing, really unrelenting through the day, not giving up over crisis. This is why Scorpio is so good handling crises, is because it's got Mars also ruling the 6th house. And that's like a just don't give up kind of energy, but that comes sometimes at a physical cost. And with that, you've got great blessings coming from Jupiter trinal to you and in its exalted placement, and it's especially strong because it's ruling your ruler Mars. But at the same time, with the moon in the 12th, there's something that you need to pay attention to that could be, because it's that moon that's ruling Jupiter, that could be something of a philosophical requirement to change your philosophical relationship to life. You need to reflect on what motivates you, what pushes you to drive yourself so hard. All these different questions about how I'm using my energy, and is that working for me, or am I actually creating some difficulty for myself that's actually not in alignment with what I need to work on. So I would say, if you think about it from the perspective of how you conduct your day-to-day life through a philosophical lens, this can really help you, because it's having that sense of perspective. Which hill am I really prepared to die on, and can I ignore the rest, and can I let go of certain other issues? There are going to be things, for example, that come through your future that require you to set them aside for now, because it's not something you can actually deal with now. There's a lot of energy for the here and now in this energy, and it's coming through a deeper inner exploration of life. It can be a time where you feel a bit vulnerable. So you might have plans and visions, but with a feeling of worry or concern around capacity, especially if there is any health issue that's coming up. I'm not saying there is, I'm just saying, it's a broad audience. These are general readings. So for those who might have that, then this is something also to recognize that there's, at this particular moment, a lot of support for you. And that support is coming also from having a great vision of faith, and what you understand is driving the motivation of your life. Venus has also moved into your relational sector as well, which is where she is the ruler. And so you've also got a lot of support coming from relationships. And it's that Venus that rules that moon. And the moon is also in the house of bed pleasures. So with Mars in the fifth, your ruler in the fifth, with Mercury in the fifth, ruling the eighth house, with Venus really cozy in her own house in the seventh, and ruling the 12th house of bed pleasures, you are probably, some of you, hopefully many of you, are enjoying the capacity that your relationships are bringing to you to feel sensual pleasure, to feel real joy, to feel real support, and help you overcome some of the day-to-day obstacles that might be there for many of you. Again, the blessing of Jupiter at the ninth house trinal to you, and especially that it's ruling your ruler at this time, is an overall a great significator. So have that faith, and look to that faith and the overriding sense of why you do what you do, to help you get through all the schlepping and the difficulties that seem to be there at this particular point with so much energy in your sixth house. Having Saturn in the sixth house is actually good. It gives you strong determination. Having the sun there equally, because the sun is considered to be a mild malefic, and you need that determination, that energy of determination, to keep soldiering on through whatever it is, and especially if it's a work challenge, or more importantly, a health challenge. You have what it takes to overcome, but you just have to go through it. The sun represents your 10th house of career and your social status. And so this hard work is probably directly related to that as well, or at the very least, directly related to your personal ambitions. But just keep checking in with that moon in the 12th. Look under the hood and see, where am I sabotaging myself? Where am I getting off track? Where am I, not getting enough of the basics, like good sleep and self-care, and being there for myself, asking for help, asking others for help. So with Venus in the seventh, people are going to be there helping you. You have Venus approaching Uranus on the 23rd. Venus will be with Uranus for the last time in your house of relationships. And so that feeling of instability and this precariousness that might be there in some relationships is also going to shift as Venus, and then on the 26th, Uranus move into your eighth house, where they will not come back. Venus will come back annually into your seventh, but never again in our lifetimes with Uranus. And so that can be also where you realize, okay, that the relationship has come to this point, and now there's something I'm looking at that is really deep. And it's coming through the connection, through trust and intimacy, coming through what you share, the resources you share, and how. So those are some bigger questions that you can ask at this time, with so much favorable energy for inspired thinking, and for energy that's really supporting you right now. So I'd have to see your natal chart to understand more about that, but make the most of this. Oh, one last thing that I didn't mention is the Venus with Ceres is squaring Juno with Pluto. And so there can be something here that is connecting to home, and where you live in a physical sense, or property in some way, that is tying you into a challenge in relationship, or there's something that needs to be adjusted around that. Or it can also be around a dynamic between like home or your family and your lineage or the people of your, your original family. Um, and some dynamic around relation that is there that might create a temporary tension. It's not, doesn't necessarily have to be a big deal. It's not as big a drama as that, but there may be something of a fear or an anxiety around security, around what home feels like at this time. And the fourth house also represents our emotional and psychological home and that foundation. And so, again, there may be something connecting you to partnerships of all kinds, business or private, and how that's affecting you in terms of your overall psychological foundation at this time, or your general sense of security. So that's part of the grappling with Pluto that's going on at this time. In a bigger, longer phase. So you've already been managing a lot of this, and you've actually had, at the very least, 3 times that Venus has squared Pluto here. It's just happening to be also the same Venus that's ruling that moon in your 12th. That also, by the way, might represent moving abroad for some of you, because Venus ruling the 12th, where the moon is representing home, and then Jupiter being ruled by that moon in the house of foreign lands as well. And the 12th and 9th together have that connection of living abroad and or dealing with people abroad. And so if that's the thing, if it's a relationship with foreigners or with a foreigner, whether it's foreign clients or foreign partner or moving abroad, there's a lot that you're dealing with that is specifically about that. And so you understand why you're doing what you're doing. And that also helps you to bear the everyday stuff, the sixth house stuff of bureaucracy and obstacles and challenges and things that you have to go through to get there. So again, I'd have to see your chart to see more about that. There's so many potentials here, but make the most of this moon and do listen to the introduction, because it also tells you on a conceptual level the bigger meaning of that relationship dynamic, which for you is playing out in a very, very unconscious, private part of your chart. Okay, Scorpio, see you in the next video. Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. This moon is in your 11th house of your vision for your future and how you're going forward in life. And that is something that's reflecting what is going on in your 5th house of your creative self and your self-expression and how you want to manifest things in your life, including just how you want to show up and be there in your life. And there's a lot of activity there already for a very long time, but really all the way from the last week of March, or even you could say second half of March, but certainly from the last week of March through April, there are going to be these massive stelliums of either 6, 7, or 8 placements at any given time. And so the pressure through the 5th house is enormous, but luckily for you, that's a very beautiful place. It's a lucky trinal house coming back to you with support. And it's in the area of where you see yourself being expressed and creative and reaching out into perhaps new opportunities or taking risks and doing something in a different and novel way. That can include an intimate relationship, a new lover, a new love dynamic, a new romance, or even something around children, expanding the family, for example, moving in the direction of more responsibility around parenting or something like that. Especially so because Jupiter, which rules your 1st house of self, is also ruling the house of home, and Jupiter is squaring that lunation, so it's in a T-square with the moon and the sun, and it's in the house of other people's money and intimacy, and where you connect with people in a really profound way. And so there's something here that you might find is hinging on your vision for your future, what you're hoping for, what you're realizing is happening around your future. But it is deeply impacted by what's going on in that 8th house sector of your chart. If this is about a business or some kind of entrepreneurial thing, then this can also be extremely beneficial. It can be a great time to reach out into a new direction, because you've got so much potential here with Saturn. The Sun is moving away from Saturn now and gaining in space and energy for seeing your way forward, because it was a week ago, it was under the Saturn and the Sun came together, and the Saturn and Sun are really they're pretty touchy with each other. Saturn takes away the brightness of the Sun, and the Sun dominates Saturn, and so there's a there's a real battle of wills there. And that's over now. It's moving forward, and that's the once in a year cycle that is beginning. And so there's a new determination here in your fifth house, where there's a feeling of something I'm ready to work on, and that comes with at the same time, the sextile back to Pluto, which is in your third house of your willpower. It's also the house of choice and skills and what you're bringing forward. So there's a lot that you can grow through here, a lot of talent and skills that you can bring into a creative enterprise, a teaching enterprise, because both the third and the fifth represent teaching. The fifth house is knowledge that you are working through, that you already know, like instinctive knowledge, or the intellect is the fifth house. And the third house is teaching skills and communication skills, practical skills. The sun also represents the ninth. It rules the ninth house, where we have also higher teaching. Sorry about that. So the other aspect of teaching is that Jupiter is in the house of psychology and depth, understanding human sort of depth psychology and the human psyche, understanding where we go when we're looking into the mystery of life, for example, the occult and this kind of thing. And that's your ruler. Very strong in dignity in Cancer, but hidden away in the eighth house. And then Venus, which is ruling this lunation, is in the sixth house, which you also don't really see. So both of those very positive energies are working in a way that requires you to adjust in a conscious way. And that can be a day-to-day adjustment. And that can also be something to do with healing and health. Because teaching is not just about sort of the traditional way that we think of teaching. It can be guidance, it can be health counseling, it can be working in a healing capacity. You know, Sagittarius has that quality because Taurus rules the sixth house. It gives a real consistency when earth signs are on the sixth. You know, whether that's Taurus or Virgo or Capricorn, and that gives a really strong capacity in a day-to-day way to hold space for healing. And here, if it's your own healing that's underway, then there's also a lot of favorable dynamics around that. But you might find yourself desiring a new role for yourself as, you know, teacher, but more of a guide, more of somebody who's going to bring knowledge and wisdom forward, not just information. And that might be what you're seeing in this vision of the moon in your house of the future. It's also how you relate now, with the moon up in the 11th house, how you relate to people in a new way. It might be recognition of how you're relating to casual acquaintances or new groups that are part of a support network. And because you're in this T square here with Jupiter in your eighth house, these could be groups that are coming through occult practices or understanding like healing modalities, you know, like whatever it is, might be, you know, 12-step program or something where you're working with others in a super favorable and constructive way. And that becomes something that is supporting your vision for the future. And of course, that moon is ruling Jupiter, so it's even more significant the way that they're interplaying. And it's Venus from the sixth that's ruling the moon. So there again, you get that health or everyday work or everyday sort of offering of yourself as somebody of service, you know, offering skills or offering your knowledge in service. So Venus is going to approach Uranus on the 23rd of April, so just 2 weeks after this lunation, and they will make that conjunction at the last degree of your sixth house. So this instability that has been both a health instability as well as a work instability for you, or perhaps even just a kind of a day-to-day feeling of just too much going on and a lot of instability since 2018, that's going to shift enormously for you. And then this insight, novelty, change, disruption will move into the seventh house. And you don't want to think of disruption as a negative thing per se. It can be, but a disruption is disruption. So if you're in a pattern where your relationships are not really helpful, they're not solid, they're not where you want them to be, you want a power of disruption. So you're going to have Uranus going through the seventh, which will allow you to relate in a completely different way to people. And it's escorted in, just like it was last July, by Venus. So if you go back to the first week of July of 2025, you'll see that this pattern is repeating whatever the themes were there. And that was about reflecting something in relationships in your life and how that felt to you. And this is now coming forward for the next 7 years with Uranus going through your house of relationship. And that will, of course, change you too. You are going to be forever changed by the impact of Uranus going through the seventh, because your way of relating and to whom you're relating is going to change a lot. Jupiter also rules everything that's in your fourth house. So it rules you in your first house of self and the way that you step out into life. But it also rules your fourth house, which is your family and your foundation in life and what makes you feel happy and secure, psychologically secure. So again, everything seems to be working in your favor at this time, moving in a really positive direction. Mercury is now direct. It's Mercury that is ruling your 10th house of career, and it's helping you now make sense of all of those dynamics around your personal ambitions or your career, and maybe about personal capacity around that. And then, of course, Mercury rules your relational sector, where we're going to find Venus and Uranus by the end of the month. And so there's something here you're already understanding about what you need to be supported, but actually by relationship or by the work that you're doing, the career or the social status or your social recognition, or even your own parents, for example, the 10th house, or authority figures of some kind. And then that is trinal to your ruler. So there's something really inspiring going on here. It's also, these are psychological houses. It's the stuff that is the beating heart of who you are behind the scenes that people don't always see. But it's creating something really important and really novel for you now, because that Mercury and the Mars transit through that house has many times coincided with the North Node, and the two of them together have conjoined, and in this basic trine to your ruler, Jupiter. And now the ruler is direct. You should also have that feeling of systems moving forward in support of you in a very beautiful way, with this trinal energy coming from the fifth and the sextile of the moon back to you. So I see this as a really lovely opportunity to see yourself in a different light, see your future in a different light, and to bring more of your personal self into your life, especially using all of this energy in the fifth house. If this is about children, or the idea of having children, or children that are already there and that you're grappling with, it could be that most of this energy is because of them or focusing on them in some way. And so that might have you busy in a number of different ways. It could be anything from your kids need more of your input to there's something actually happening in their life that they're struggling with, and you need to be there to support them emotionally and psychologically. And then once Jupiter, your ruler, moves into the ninth house, this could even be something that extends to you becoming, say, a grandparent, for example, because it's the fifth from the fifth house, which is your children's children. And so there can be also a lot of excitement at this time for Sagittarius around the potential for having grandchildren. So that's just one of many interpretations here. All right, Sagittarius, I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. Your ruler is with the Sun at the time of this full moon, and in opposition is the Moon at the top of your chart in your 10th house. So there's a lot going on in the dynamic between your home, or your feeling of what grounds you, what stabilizes you, and your work commitments, or your sense of your maybe it's like your sense of your personal ambition or reputation. That is something that you're becoming clear on. It's really important when your ruler is involved in these dynamics. And just last week, Saturn was exactly conjunct the Sun, and it's a cycle, a 1-year cycle that will repeat next year in Aries season. And it's a cycle that your ruler is making in this area that's going to be very, very important for you for a long time to come, in the fourth house of establishing a new foundation for your life going forward. And especially because Uranus is also moving into your sixth, and Venus, which is currently ruling this lunation, is in the fifth house of your self-expression and taking risks and so on, moving into your sixth house by the 26th of the month, which will change your everyday life. So there's going to be a lot of change here that requires you to reassess, have I got the right foundation for this? Have I set myself up in a way that I can feel myself growing into this next phase of my life? Because this is a new phase of your life. Saturn is at the bottom of your chart, which is often considered to be a house of endings. This is the midnight zone of the chart, where the so-called day ends and the new day begins. And so that's a significator in and of itself. But the fact that you've also had these cycles upon cycles with Saturn Neptune at the 0 degree point on the 20th of February here, and then Saturn with the Sun on the 25th of March here, and then Saturn Sun sextiling Pluto, which is in your second house, and in this extremely, supportive but effortful dynamic around your money, your possessions, your relationship values, your family connections, your sense of your own personal value. All of these dynamics are playing out at this time. The sun that rules your house of what you share with another person, and which Saturn is ruling the second house where we find this Pluto, and then that is being squared by Venus and Ceres. So this potential for insecurity around either taking a risk or something about an investment and needing to find an option, let's say, because it's a square. There's a solution that is required here. There's something that requires some adjustment. But Venus is very happy. She's happy. She's trinal to you. She rules the fifth house that she's in, Taurus, and she's ruling your 10th house as well. So this can also be something that is connecting you to your children or the lives of your children, or to the topic of children. Do we have them? Do we not have them? Do I want them, or am I better off doing another thing with my life? Or is it that the children themselves are taking off and going in new directions? And that's also got you thinking about this whole story of what it means to be a parent, an authority figure, taking responsibility for the family. So there's something highlighting all of those things. Jupiter is in your house of relationship, and that's really a great time to have an exalted Jupiter in your house of relationship, because it's also trining back to your third house of your everyday sort of commitments, everyday life, your family, your siblings, your cousins, your neighbors, even, and that is being trined by Mercury from the third house that has now finished its retrograde cycle, and Mars the week before, which is your exaltation ruler, last week was trining Jupiter at this time in the week before this full moon. And so there's a lot of creative connections that you're making. These can be business connections. It's the third house that also represents commerce and exchanges, with Venus being in your fifth house of entrepreneurship, and then Jupiter being in your house of partnership, with the moon showing up something that is this moon ruling this, that is a consequence of all of that together, showing itself in the house of your personal ambition and your reputation and your career. Or your vocation, if you're not interested in working, if it's not about career, it's about social status in a general sense, or the thing that you realize you want to do out in the world. So your day-to-day life is changing, and this is an opportunity to really see the goals and ambitions. Do they still align? Is it still right for you? Is this going in the right direction for you? Overall, it seems like a big yes at this stage. And of course, I would need to see your natal chart to be able to see more details about that. But certainly, there's a lot that you can work with here of all of the signs. Saturn is perhaps the best place to have. Capricorn is the best place to have Saturn in the fourth house, because it is ruled by your exaltation ruler. It's a quadrant house, and it's, of course, your ruler. So Capricorn does much better with Saturn in the fourth than many other signs would do, because it can be a real heavyweight. Having Saturn in the fourth, it can make you feel even emotionally or psychologically heavy, but you are going to be able to use it for future planning and strategizing. And that will become even more noticeable when Mars finally moves into Aries. And I think that's on the 10th or the 12th of April. I'll come back and talk about it in another video. So it looks pretty good for you there, Capricorn, and make the most of this. And I'll see you in the next video. And Aquarius on the Sun, Moon, or Ascendant. Aquarius on the Ascendant is having this lunation trinal to you as well, with the Moon up in the ninth house, smiling back on you with a trine and showing you something about your sense of your vision for life. Why am I alive? Why do I do what I do? Perhaps also what it is that you're extending or expanding into in terms of faith, and what it is that you want to use in terms of what faith brings you, what kind of support faith can bring you. And that also implies a relationship potential to either a second spouse for some people who are working on a second partner, and also potential for dynamics with fathers. And the ninth house is fathers and father figures or teacher figures, or even legal counsel for that matter. But it looks very favorable to you, and it's an opportunity for you to see that vision for yourself at the same time as your ruler is in this third house of using that willpower. So with Saturn in the third house, you've got a strong determination. And the week before this full moon, on the 25th of March, Saturn was with the Sun, your ruler was with the Sun, creating a whole new synodic cycle of another year, which will repeat next time we have Aries season in 2027. But at this particular point, it was at 5 degrees, which happened to be in a sextile to Pluto, which is in your sign at 5 degrees. And this is one of those very sensitive degree points of the year. And this is the only time that Saturn, your ruler, will be calling back in a sextile during its time here in Aries. So this will not repeat. And then so this is an opportunity for you to realize what it is that you want to work with, how you want to change, how you want to sort of will yourself forward with new goals, new aims, new visions, and how you may need to realign the way you connect with people or communicate with people, how you might need to develop skills. So you realize, okay, there's something I want out of this life. This is who I need to become. This is who I feel I'm being kind of challenged to step up into, because with Pluto in the first house, you need to develop a certain amount of personal power, not power over people, but a personal sense of power and stability. And Saturn with the Sun in the third is really helpful for that. And of course, Neptune is still there, so the vision is still part of this bigger picture. But here, the bigger focus is on this very, very tight sextile that is actually kind of part of a flow into this lunation where we have the Libra full moon in your ninth house. So it's a great time, the week before, the week of the full moon, and in this general time period, because Saturn is going to hold that sextile for a couple of weeks. You've got a lot of time that you can develop based on what you have been understanding in the days leading up to the full moon and around the full moon, where you start to have this realization of, oh, this is what I'm here for. This is the thing that really excites me. This is the idea or the belief or the, I don't know, political dynamic or whatever it is that I see is important to me. And that's how I want to reach out into my future, into my life. The 11th house is the sort of future that you see, and the ninth house is the sense of what you're here for, and in the higher sense of the dharma, the sense of your higher purpose. And so, especially because you've got Jupiter in the sixth house, great. It's really favorable for being busy, keeping yourself very busy, which we anyway see, and you will be, I'm afraid. There's no escaping that through April, with these repeated dynamics of these big stellii, I don't know, stelliums, that are shaping up in your third house again and again and again, because we get the stelliums that include at times the moon. Venus was involved at one point, and then your Mercury will come in, and then Mars will come in. No, I think Mars comes in first, then Mercury comes in, and all of them staying together with either 6 or even 8 planets, if we keep Eris in the mix, and all of them focusing your attention on your everyday choices and on your everyday activity. So with Jupiter in your sixth and all of this going on in your third, it's going to be hard to imagine you sitting down for a while. So take care of your overall well-being with Jupiter in the sixth house, to give yourself breaks, to make sure you're taking good care of yourself, and not just feel that you have to be sort of on duty all the time. If there's a particular issue or project that you're really keen on, then you know it'll end in a X period of time, 10 days or 2 weeks or something, then of course throw yourself into it. But be careful if it's going to go on longer than that, because you'll need to take a bit of a measured approach, because it's a busy phase for several months. It's not going to be something short-lived. And so your attitude to how that feels to you is going to be important in terms of how well you're doing, because the third house is the mind. And with all of that activity going on, you can end up in a kind of a mental burnout that can lead to, anxiety or just, senior moments and whatever, having just too much input, too much mental input, or too much input day to day. So do beware of that. So Venus is going to move across your fourth house, and then on the 23rd, she's meeting up with Uranus, which is your modern ruler. And Venus and Uranus conjoin on the 23rd, and then Venus slides into your fifth house, and followed by Uranus on the 26th. And that's exactly what happened in the first week of July last year. So I think it was the 3rd, 4th of July when they did that. And so go back to that period of time, because that will also help to show you the direction that things are headed after the end of April. But this is what everything is kind of building towards at this point. And then once that happens, Uranus will then be for 7 years trinal to you, trinal to your ninth house from the fifth house, which is a very fortunate house, lucky, fun, self-expressive, and then trining your ninth house of your higher purpose or vision for your life. And this is going to bring a whole different flavor to your life. Because with Uranus on the fourth, there will have been quite a lot of stability, and that can include psychological and mental, or certainly sort of home related, or foundational stability that felt rocked and felt really unstable, or changeable, or busy. And it may have been fun, but at a certain point, it's nice then when things come to a bit of a slowing point, and that will definitely take place. You'll feel a distinct difference once you start to find the Uranus trine back from the fifth to the first. So you'll also have probably a better feeling about having Pluto in your sign. And I'll be coming back and talking more about this because it's part of the bigger feature of the year, both the mini grand trine and then the cradle or the basket formation, Balboa's formation there. That is this once in a worldly event. It's just an extraordinarily rare event. And here you're probably going to find that as you're building up through April, you are going to be better able to express all of those things that are accumulating right now in terms of goals and intentions and desires. And Uranus will help to tap through the power of Pluto going through your first house to help sort of transform you, remake you into the individual that you need to be able to express yourself in that Uranian way, in that very unique way, through Uranus in Gemini in the fifth. So a very exciting time, but it might feel pretty exhausting. It might feel like a lot is going on. So just don't fret. And the way through that is that vision, you holding the vision for what life represents to you in a very big meaning, like not just this moment, but really what is the meaning of my life? All right, Aquarius, I'll see you in the next video. Make the most of it. Whoopsie. Pisces, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. You have this lunation in your eighth house of intimacy. It's a place where you see things coming from a sort of hidden place. It can be the unconscious mind, or it can be family patterns. It can be patterns of intimacy. It can be sexual intimacy. It can be emotional intimacy, psychological intimacy, how you bond, how you connect with people. Venus is in a very favorable sign. She's in her own sign now at the time of this lunation. So she's ruling this moon, and she happens to be your exaltation ruler. So she's in her own sweet spot in the third house, very friendly, bringing creative ideas, creative connections. Sorry. Sorry about that, Pisces. I'm talking all day long and my voice just can't take it. I think I'm in the wrong job. Where were we? Yes, so we have this lovely Venus who's very friendly to you by exaltation. She's in her comfort zone, in her own sign in the third house, ruling this lunation. And so there's something here that's extremely favorable. It's constructive. It's about connecting, talking about things, finding friendly support, bonding perhaps also with siblings, but in a way that can bring out an understanding that might be, whether it be psychological or again emotional, or even a literal physical connection, because Jupiter is also in your fifth house, your ruler, ruled by this moon in the eighth house. So there can be even renewed sexual intimacy or a new sexual intimacy that seems to really flow, working for you in a way that may not have been available or that you may not have noticed before. Again, this is part of a bigger cycle. Listen to the introduction to find that out. And in terms of this full moon, it's calling back it's the lunation that is exposing or revealing what was happening at the Pisces new moon at 28 degrees of Pisces. And that was back on the 20th of March. So this is a revelation within that cycle. And then in the longer arc of this cycle, 18 months from now, this is going to be the completion of this cycle that you're becoming aware of. So this eighth house stuff is also occult. It's also understanding psychological patterns in other people and helping, counseling, working through the sort of mystery school stuff of life. You know, what the meaning of life? Why are we here? And then with Jupiter in the fifth, especially, there's a lot of creative potential here. That creative potential can be anything from you just expressing who you are because it's your ruler, and tapping into more fun, more joy, a bigger self-expanded enterprise, an entrepreneurial dynamic there. There's so much that you can be working with here, because in that fifth house, it's also knowledge, it's wisdom that you are. Well, this would be in a natal chart. It's the intellect. It's how you use your mind, how you use your wise intuition, and it's what you already are coming through in this lifetime with. But you know, again, it depends natal chart to natal chart, but it's an opportunity now to also touch that wisdom. You have a trine from Mercury in your first house, which is ruling your eighth house, so something perhaps connecting to relational dynamics in a general sense, or to home and family and where you live in a general sense, because that's what Mercury is ruling for you. But it's in a beautiful supportive trine from your first house of yourself to this beautiful, lucky fifth house, expressive, fun fifth house, where you find Jupiter exalted, ruling back that first house. So equally, the week before this full moon, there was a trine from Mars as well. And the Mercury trine has held for many days because of the slowness of Mercury as it's just coming out of its retrograde cycle. So you have a lot of opportunities here for planning things, for taking action. Mars rules your ninth house of your vision for your life, and it also rules your second house of money. So perhaps there's been a lot of action, discussion, motivation around sorting out money. And this will be true in a longer sense as well, because this is where you have Neptune and Saturn. And just the week before this full moon, the Sun, which is now in your second house, was with Saturn at 5 degrees and in sextile to Pluto. And that's a really great opportunity to get really serious about something, taking care with something. So Pluto is in your 12th house of the unconscious, or what you can also describe as the house of self-undoing. It can represent, with Pluto in the 12th, can represent compulsive behavior or behavior that feels really profoundly difficult to understand. Like, why do I do what I do? What is the motivation? But Pluto will help you reveal that. So this is part of the process of digging in and realizing, oh, wait, I do that thing. Or the house of loss is also part of a 12th house signification. So what are we ready to let go of? And this can also be with relationship to a family dynamic, because the second house is family, or a pattern of financial or personal value. It can be possessions, it can be things where you realize that actually this is a brilliant time to simplify things as much as possible, to streamline everything, to work with systems. It might be financial systems, especially as Saturn also rules your 11th house of gains. It might be systems of whatever supports you. Have you got the whatever financial strategy you need to feel your future is more or less secure. This is not necessarily straightforward because Venus and Ceres are in a square to Pluto and Juno in your 12th. And there's a strong meaning of how you're interconnecting or working through others, working with others, but also in terms of the social context of Aquarius, and where there may be some insecurities around security. So there's an insecure security here. And especially because you still have Uranus there in the third house of the everyday and your willpower and choices that you need to make and things that affect you in a day-to-day way, including your communications, financial exchanges, and all those different things. So there may be some adjustment that's required here. That can also be an adjustment that has a lot to do with something very day to day, not necessarily a dramatic thing, but just in terms of how you're bonding and connecting with people around you, your friends and family, or, sort of pals, your coffee pals in the third house. Also, how you're using your communication skills or teaching skills. This is also something highlighted that can be very strong potential with your ruler in the fifth. That's the house of students as well. So that's tied into education. And the third house is also educating, especially with a particular skill in mind. You're bringing a skill to the fore. And with Venus here, that's extremely supported, really well supported, all through the month of April until she meets up on the 23rd of April with Uranus. And then after that, Venus moves into your fourth house of home, and Uranus follows on the 26th of April. And Uranus will never meet up with Venus in your third house again in your lifetime. So it's quite a big shift in terms of your maybe relating or communicating style in the everyday sense. This is also with reference to your mind. And so you might have felt that now you can stabilize plans and visions and ideas in a way that felt precarious before, or felt like it was always changing. But then Venus moving into the fourth with Uranus already happened in 2025 in the first week of July. And so you can go back to around the third, fourth of July, pardon me, up until the 7th of July when Uranus moved into Gemini. And this is the energy that we're seeing again. But now you've seen it, and it won't be exactly the same the second time. So you're going to see some kind of a feature of what felt like maybe change or instability or a need to deal with either house and home, or lineage issues, family issues, your family of origin, your ancestral lineage. These kinds of things can be part of this bigger picture that you're preparing for something that's changing, that you kind of anticipate in some way. And that is another meaning of the eighth house, where we find the moon, which is the house of what you receive from others. And it can be some kind of alimony, from a relationship dynamic that's changing, or it can be inheritance. It can be money that you owe, or there's money that is being exchanged in some way or shared in some way that you're realizing something about here. And then Venus in the third is how you're negotiating around that, how you're dealing with all of the ins and outs around that. So it's not necessarily a problematic thing, but it's also going to come through some instability and toing and froing, great need for change here, especially with the square from Venus back to Pluto in the 12th. There may be some patterns of behavior that you're recognizing are just not sustainable, and that might be around how you spend money, for example. Because Saturn is there in the second, and it's showing up anything that will not be functional financially as well, on top of everything else, on top of the fact that the moon is also in your eighth. So I think that's it, Pisces. It's a lot. So you're busy, and you're going to stay busy. That's just the way it is, for Pisces particularly, as the planets, Mercury and Mars are still there with you through till the middle of April. And then you still have a lot of busyness in the second house which is really focusing on what supports you. Maybe you're needing to find ways of getting support and asking for support at this time, or scrambling for sources of income, new ways of working with money, or realizing with a stark clarity, especially at this time of the Libra full moon, what are my values and do I share them with people who I also have to manage finances and other things, potentially intimacy as well. All right, I'm going to leave it there. So all the best for you with this. And I'm so glad you're here. Thank you, as always, for being here right through to the end. And I'll see you in the next video.